since being thrown out of the Windsor estate, the police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation and development on this story involving the Epstein files and all the allegations that have been swirling around about Andrew over the many years, from Virginia Giuffre, now sadly deceased, and since then, and certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files as released in the last few weeks. But the police have arrived at Sandringham Estate this morning, where Andrew has made his new home. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is. He has been arrested by the police. Of course, the brother of the current king, the second son of our late Queen Elizabeth. This is an extraordinary development. Those of us who've been talking an awful lot about establishment cover-ups and lack of, should we say, interest by the police in what are very, very serious allegations against Andrew. Perhaps pleased that that pressure has finally been put on the police, and they have done the job of actually looking into these issues seriously. Must bear in mind, of course, that the Prince has not been charged with any crime at this point, and he has always denied any wrongdoing in relation to any of the allegations about him. We'll give you more on that. We'll talk to you about that throughout the show, but I'm just being told that the arrest has been on suspicion of misconduct in public office. This, of course, relates to those Epstein file allegations and the documents that, if they are true, would suggest that he had, it is alleged, passed on basically what was confidential government information when he was the UK trade envoy for this country for 10 years to Jeffrey Epstein for Jeffrey Epstein's financial gain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is it that time already? 6:03, Talk Breakfast. Top of the morning, Mark Dolan with you for a very, very big show this morning. And breaking as we come on air, Nigel Farage steps into the Muslim public prayer row, saying such displays of religious dominance are unacceptable and should be banned. Is he right? What about Kemi Badenoch, who says that what Sir Keir Starmer is doing is sucking up to British Muslims? Let me know your thoughts. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note and let's talk. By our counting, this is U-turn number 19. No, 19, as the Prime Minister is expected to scrap plans to toughen immigration rules around indefinite leave to remain. But will granting citizenship to the so-called Boris wave cost the taxpayer tens of billions of pounds? And if so, did you vote for that? And Kemi Badenoch, leader of the Tories, says that the public should intervene and stop shoplifters. But would you risk life and limb to save a jar of Nescafe Cold Blend? Also this morning, the one-in, one-out migrants returned to Britain in lorries. You couldn't make it up. And Yvette Cooper, our erstwhile Foreign Secretary, reveals £6 billion of British taxpayers' money will be spent on green schemes overseas, despite cuts to the foreign aid budget. So much to get through. Is Keir Starmer sucking up to British Muslims? What do you make of this Muslim public prayer row. My phone number once again, 03444991000. You can hear the show via DAB Plus in app and online, or you can watch us because this is now a TV product. All you've got to do, head to YouTube, search Talking Up We Pop, and as the saying goes, let's talk. And we kick off at 6:05 on a Friday morning with the front page of the Daily Mail. As conflict escalates and lenders pull deals, experts warn of 3 rate rises this year. Iran war unleashes mortgage shock for millions. Families could face 3 interest rate rises this year as the economic fallout from the Iran war begins to bite. The Bank of England warned yesterday that the growing conflict in the Middle East could send inflation spiralling and trigger a surge in unemployment. Now, let's be clear about this. Let's have it right, producer Christian. We are not going to deploy the smoke and mirrors of the Iran war, which has only just started, as an excuse, as a cover-up for Rachel Reeves's terrible mistakes as Chancellor of the Exchequer. The Iran war is not responsible for 0% growth in January of this year. The Iran war is not responsible for stubborn inflation, which is almost double what it was under Rishi Sunak. Remember him? I can't lie, the Tories weren't perfect, but if I had to, I'd have Rishi back in a flash. Wouldn't you? I'd have him back in a... He wasn't perfect, but compared to Starmer, he was Winston blinking Churchill. In July 2024, we had effectively 0 unemployment. In July 2024, we had the highest growth in the G7. In July 2024, we had 2% inflation. Now, Rachel from Accounts getting ready to blame Donald Trump and to blame the Iran war. I'm not having it, not on my watch. I will not allow that lie to linger. Yes, there is an impact on energy prices from what's happening in the Middle East. I would argue that Donald Trump's noble war will lead to far more security and stability in the Middle East once Iran is completely disarmed. They're nearly done. The job is almost finished, at which point I think you will see very low inflation and historically low energy prices. By the way, big difference. Again, another contrast with the Tories. The Tories weren't perfect, OK? They signed up for net zero, which is economic and industrial disarmament, right? It's suicide. They obviously opened the borders, the Boris wave. They made a lot of mistakes. But do you remember Liz Truss? I'd have her back as well, by the way. 0344 499 1000. Would you have Liz Truss over Keir Starmer? Because I would. Liz Truss versus Starmer all day long. Because she had her rather challenging mini budget, but it came from the right place. She was trying to improve people's lives by boosting the growth of this country. And of course, what happened is that the blob set her up for a fall, didn't they? They didn't mention all of the pensions liabilities. They didn't want it. The Treasury did not support her plans to boost economic growth. And what have we got as a result? 0% growth in January. Anyhow, so Liz Truss, at that time, the British people were struggling with the cost of energy after the Ukraine war. And you know what she did? She wrote a cheque for £40 billion and she supported everyone. We can't afford to do that now because what Rachel Reeves has done has destroyed the economy. We're broke, right? The cupboard's bare because Labour governments always run out of your money and my money. Do you remember that note from Liam Byrne in the run-up to the 2010 election when he said to the incoming Chancellor, sorry, Chancellor, there's no money left. LOL. Because that's what happens with Labour government. They always run out of your money and my money. So Liz Truss helps everyone with their energy bills, 40 billion, because we could afford it under the Tories. Now nothing. What you're going to get, there'll be scraps for those at the bottom end of the economic ladder, including Benefits Britain. But if you're listening to this show now at 6:09 in the morning and you're in your van and you're on your way to work and you're putting a shift in, you might be 65 or 70 years of age and you should be retired by now, but you can't afford to, right? This government think you're rich and they won't be helping you with your energy bills and they won't be helping you at the petrol station and it's a crime. Front page of The Express, inflation to rise in Iran war shock. It's not the Iran war. It's Rachel from accounts, folks. That's the bigger picture. Britain risks a surge in inflation as the Iran war sends oil and gas prices sky high. Let me correct The Express on that. It's a great paper and I love The Express. A lot of common sense in there. But did you know that the cost of oil and gas was 40% higher after Russia's invasion of Ukraine? So, yes, there's an uptick. It'll come straight down. The war's nearly done because of the courage and moral rectitude of Donald Trump. It's a noble war. And because of the courage of Israel. By the way, I've got a question for you at 10 minutes past 6. Producer Christian. Again, I know he's not perfect, but in a sense, is Netanyahu, is he Israel's Winston Churchill? Because I think he is. He's disarmed Hamas. Hamas have been defeated. It's in their charter to kill all Jews. They're gone. And now he's dealing with Iran. And he's taken them down. And they will be. Forget about regime change. Everyone's saying, oh, America has decided that they don't want regime. It doesn't matter. There's nothing to regime over. It's hollowed out. There's nothing there. There is no navy. All of Iran's ships are at the bottom of the sea, right? They're swimming with the fishes. There's no air force. And the nuclear stuff is in retreat as well. So I think it's a noble war, and I think inflation will go up and it will go down. But I'm so sorry, I'm not letting Rachel from accounts off, because you're not stupid. You've got a brain in your head. You know that the economy was absolutely, messed up long before this war in Iran started. Daily Mirror, COVID inquiry, the verdict. They saved us and the NHS. What does this even mean? Heroic health workers put own lives at risk to prevent system collapse. Well, that was their job. They are doctors and nurses. There was a pandemic. That's a health thing. So when you're a doctor or you're a nurse and there's a pandemic, that's going to be a busy time. That's a little bit like, Christian, when there's a fire, the fire brigade, they get a little busy. I think you'll find that's what they do because they're called a fireman. And you can cancel me at 12 minutes past 6 for saying fireman. But I'm calling them a fireman because most people that work in the fire service are men. So it's a fireman. Cancel me. I dare you, Engineer Sam. Cancel me for saying the word fireman. It's a fireman. It's a man with a hose. Family show. Behave yourselves. Now, by the way, there are women, heroic women that work in the fire service too. But it's predominantly men, and may God bless both genders for doing what they do. But now we've got to feel sorry for the doctors and nurses during the pandemic for doing their job. The headline, staff put their lives on the line and saved the NHS from the collapse in the pandemic. Chairwoman Baroness Hallett said frontline workers put in a superhuman effort to prop up the system. Well, I hate to beg to differ, actually, but I also remember empty hospitals and empty wards and TikTok videos of nurses dancing because there was nothing else to do, because we said stay home to save the NHS. For the first time in our history, the NHS that we pay a fortune for was not there to protect us. We had to protect it. And there's another element to this COVID inquiry that we're covering later, aren't we, Christian? We've got two great guests pointing out that the stay home to save the NHS actually cost thousands of lives because people with heart conditions and cancer didn't go to the hospital. So I beg to differ about all these heroes. I think they were not there for millions of sick Brits, some of whom suffered worse health outcomes, some of whom died. The Guardian, new threat from Iran as fears grow of energy crisis. Enough already with the hysteria. I'm not having it at 14 minutes past 6. We're going to be fine. There's going to be an increase in inflation and there's going to be a higher cost of oil and gas for the next few weeks. And in the summer, it will fall away. Quote me on that. Clip it now. The war's won. Iran is done. There's nothing to regime over. Fury at Farage and his call to ban public prayer by Muslims. We'll cover that later. The Sun, hell's bills. Britain's energy bills could jump by as much as £300 a year after the Iran war led to soaring oil and gas prices. Daily Telegraph, Saudis threaten strikes on Iran. You see, that's why, I mean, actually, I'm loving this war. I think it's brilliant because what it's done is it's united the Middle East. They all love each other now. Israel the Emirates, Iran. Iran. You better get your countries right. Isn't it lucky that I'm not the peace negotiator? Wait, which one's Iran? You've got Saudi Arabia, you've got Bahrain, you've got the Emirates, you've got the United States, and you've got Israel, all in lockstep against this vicious regime. By the way, quite interesting. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Christian, did you know that there is no public prayer? You won't believe this. In Saudi Arabia, perhaps the most religious country on God's earth, they pray in mosques and at home. Imagine that. Imagine. Isn't that old-fashioned? They don't pray in the street, 3,000 men yelling about the supremacy of Allah at the expense of all other faiths, which is very un-British as a message. They don't. They practice their faith in the mosque and at home. Should it be the same here? And what do you think about old Starmer? Is Kemi Bade not right? Is he sucking up to Muslims? 6:15, this is Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. It is 18 minutes past 6. Happy Friday, one and all. Lovely to have you listening. You can also watch on YouTube, search Talk and Up We Pop. Bill has messaged the show. Good morning, Mark. Farage comments about Muslim public prayer were absolutely right. If there was Christian public prayer, I bet Khan would tell the police to stop it. Great show, says Bill. Mark in Croydon. Good morning, Mark. How are you? Welcome to Talk Breakfast. Mark says, good morning, Mark. Sadly, it's becoming the Muslim way or no way. You only have to watch that clip again of them calling the police when someone was preaching in Whitechapel who wasn't Muslim. Takeaways serving halal meat, some not serving alcohol at all, and the constant talk of community. It's interesting. Great message, Mark. That word community has been weaponized, especially community relations. Michael in Birchington in Kent says, good morning, Mark. Can't say it's a great show because you've only been on for 5 minutes. It's true, the pressure's on. I have to deliver. Marky boy, or Michael, better get your name right. Your tie could do with being moved to the centre of your collar. As I watch, it's annoying me and detracting from my televisual experience. Christian, am I straight, first of all? That's a very big question. You better ask Mrs. He wants me to shift my lump leftwards. Is that it? That way. There you go. You see, now this is the kind of... Is that enough? Have I got a lump in the middle? And are you happy with my lump? Christian is very happy with my lump. Can I tell you, folks, that if you want to see this magic, this TV gold, head over to YouTube, search Talk and Up We Pop. Live in the studio, someone better looking than me, who doesn't even bother with a tie. He doesn't need to. It's Benedict Spence. Good morning, Benedict.
Good morning. There's a reason why I get shouted at when I'm wearing a tie. By somebody else in this studio, who will remain nameless. But very often I come in with a tie, and it's never quite straight enough. I swear to God, there is no way it could ever be
a very feisty lady that's on air from Monday to Thursday from 10 a.m.
It's entirely possible,
but
I won't say.
The unofficial queen of this place,
Empress,
or even official Empress is right.
Or Tsarina. Should we get more grand? Should we get more grand and terrifying?
That's indeed.
Yes.
Text me if you know who we're talking about. We'll all get in trouble for this. They'll be dragged into a meeting later. Daily Express: inflation to rise in Iran war shock. And Daily Mail: Iran war unleashes mortgage shock for millions. I've got to say that quite clearly what's happening in the Middle East is impacting oil and gas prices, but the Chancellor cannot use this as an explanation for why our economy is in the toilet.
No, but they will. that's going to be... We're going to be beaten round the head.
Rachel
by
Reed,
this.
she loves this war because now she's got an excuse. She's got a fig leaf to cover up her failures in office.
It's absolutely right. This is going to be, they could... Christmas has come early for the Labour Party because they get to sit there and they get to wring their hands and go, oh, isn't war bad? We should have less of it. And we're not going to get involved morally. From a moral perspective, we're not going to get involved. Because, of course, we don't have any viable ships and we don't have enough planes and we don't have enough soldiers because they've not properly looked after the state of the armed forces. And before anybody shouts at me, there's also them as well. That's like equal opportunities criticism here. But nonetheless, it means that they get to sit there and go, oh, well, isn't it terrible? And now... inevitably, it means that the economic pain that comes down the road, that was coming down the road anyway, but is going to be exacerbated by this, will be entirely dumped on this particular issue, not on their truly appalling management of the economy. Unemployment numbers were already up before this war broke out, remember, but trust me, that's going to get lost in the fog, so to speak.
We had effectively zero unemployment, statistically almost negligible unemployment in July 2027 under the evil Tories.
In 2027?
I've actually, can you tell I'm not a morning person, 24. I've got my...
I tell you what, if in 2027, July 2027, it's back to there, somebody clip this and get it back out there, you will look like the actual Oracle of Delphi. I
can tell you all these statistics for today's show have been provided by Diane Abbott. And she told me that inflation is minus 55. May God bless her. In 2024... under the evil Tories, we had 2% inflation, we had the highest growth in the G7, and we had effective zero unemployment. So they've been in power now, Labour have been in power for approaching 2 years. And the issue that I've got is, yes, I will not deny the inflationary impact of what's happening in the Middle East. Of course, only a fool would deny it. But the point is that our economy does not have the resilience to handle a shock like that. And that's what happens to economies. It's like bumps in the road. They happen. And that's why you need sound management of the economy. That's why you need low inflation. That's why you need growth. None of which we have under Rachel from accounts.
To be fair, growth has been, that's the one difficult thing that the Tories were never able to quite get going properly. If we're being honest with ourselves here, there has been no real growth in this country since the 2007-2008 financial crisis. Because what growth we have, is because of large migration numbers, which expands GDP. That's what it does. It doesn't actually cause any growth. It just means that you can massage the figures, a bit like sending half of people to universities. It makes it suddenly, the unemployment figures go down because half the people that might be unemployed are currently taking out huge amounts of debt to go and do things like media studies. But this is the thing, ultimately, which is that, as you say, our economy unprepared for any of this.
Exposed.
It's hit it. It's going to hit it at a rate of knots. But the truly frustrating thing, and, I've been coming to this station for a very long time, and the conversations always seem to be the same. The ability to weather the storm is within the grasp of Keir Starmer, should he wish to. Everything is downstream of energy policy. This is an energy story, the war in the Gulf, first and foremost. That's what it's affecting.
Good point.
We are, everybody knows it, it's not a secret, we are an island made of coal in a sea of oil with all the gas you could wish to frack, and once upon a time, at the very least, even now, we are a world leader in nuclear technology. We have absolutely everything you could want to be energy abundant. And instead we have a man who was soundly rejected by the electorate as Labour leader, sitting there saying, no, wind. Just wait for the wind to blow and maybe for the sun to shine, and that'll solve everything. And, oh, why are the prices so expensive? That's the situation we have. With energy policy set by Ed Miliband, who the public saw first time round was a half-wit. He is the one that is being able to say, even in the face of this disaster that's coming down the road, no. This is a proof that my way is the right way, even though with already the most expensive energy prices in the developed world before this happened, it's just going to get worse as a result of those policies.
The DNA of our energy crisis is inherently left-wing, because if you go back to, like, the sins of the father, the original sin, 2010, it was Ed Davey, who is now a Knight of the Realm, who proudly announced that as part of the coalition, the influence from the Lib Dems over the Conservatives at that time was to scrap our forthcoming nuclear projects.
Yeah.
And I think that there was a speech from Nick Clegg at the time, Deputy Prime Minister, who said the problem is we don't really want to invest in new nuclear power stations because they won't come online till 2021. And that's a long time away. Well, we're in 2026 now. We'd bite your hand off for those nuclear power stations. Meanwhile, Ed Miliband pouring concrete into oil wells.
Honest to God, in my benevolent dictatorship, the first thing that I would do is round up every single politician from that era who got us into this situation and take them all and put them on South Georgia, as close to Antarctica as we possibly get, and let them live out their days in the windy paradise down there, because that's what they want. They want the world to be run by wind power. They can have it. It's British territory. There's no qualms about having to take passports or anything like that. You can stick them there. They can be happy down there, because what they have done to this country is absolutely one of the most destructive things. All the things that were said about what Thatcher did to industry and all that sort of thing is going to be considered pale in comparison to the disaster that has been wrought on us.
No one's against the mix. We want clean air.
We do.
We want to have renewables, and we also want to have oil and gas which are on our shores that we could sell to the world and use ourselves. If we were drilling for oil and gas and frack, if we were fracking, then I can assure you there would be no energy crisis. What about this fury at Farage and his call to ban Muslim prayer? Meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch says Sir Keir Starmer is sucking up to Muslims. What do you think?
I mean, Farage has waded into this. This is obviously the argument that's been started by Nick Timothy, a Conservative, and this is where you start to see a slightly more resurgent Tory party.
Can you remind us what Nick Timothy... I'm confused because I thought Nick Timothy was an actor from All Creatures Great and Small. So
he can do both. He's a very talented individual.
I've been on a journey. Turns out that was bull.
Yeah.
That was Christopher Timothy.
Yeah.
Who's a very good actor with a surprising...
He may be playing Nick Timothy now, for all we know.
You never know. By the way, this Nick Timothy guy, Shadow Justice Secretary... He's got a pair of cojones on him, hasn't he?
Well, he used to be Theresa May's advisor, didn't he?
No one's perfect.
Well, absolutely. But
what did he do? Remind our audience. You'd have to have been living in a cave not to know.
So this is about the call to prayer and the mass prayer event in Trafalgar Square by a large group of Muslims, including Sadiq Khan, listening to the Adhan. Of course, we've had Ramadan, and now we're coming to the end of that. And this is about... what is called demonstrations, I think, of power and domination and also intimidation in the performance of religious rites. Now, what is basically being said here on the one hand is Nick Timothy, and now to a degree Nigel Farage as well, is saying that this is unacceptable and that this shouldn't be allowed because it is intimidatory. And then you've had the backlash, which is lots of people going, well, you can't say that because it's bigoted and it's not fair, and you're fine for menorahs and all that sort of thing in Christmas markets to be in Trafalgar Square, so why not Muslims? And it's it's an interesting argument. It's worth diving into partly because a lot of the people who seem to be very upset that Nick Timothy is saying that this is intimidatory by members of the Muslim community, those people seem to also believe at the same time that, say, people praying silently outside an abortion clinic is intimidatory. So on the one hand, they're saying that there's two standards here, to which you can immediately turn back and say, well, yes, there is, and it seems to be coming from you. You seem to think that 1,000-odd Muslim people praying in public is fine, but one Christian person praying in public is not fine. But at the same time, there's a theological element to this as well. It's important. That is that in Islam, once a venue or a location or a building has been converted into a mosque or a prayer space or something like that, it can be forevermore. And that's the key difference here, actually. The Jewish community does not rock up to Trafalgar Square, light a menorah, and then say, well, this is ours now. This is a synagogue. This is what we can always do. But that religion, it says in that religion, does allow them to do so. It's a tricky issue.
Well, I'll be honest with you. He's probably going to win the next general election. Here is what Nigel Farage thinks about this public display of faith. Take a listen to this.
I've never seen Jewish services taking place in places of historic Christian worship or anywhere else. Look, we have to get this right. We can't stop individuals praying. We wouldn't want to stop individuals praying. But mass prayer is banned. Mass Muslim prayer is banned in many Muslim countries in the Middle East itself. So, yes, we have to stop this kind of mass demonstration, provocative demonstration in historic British sites, because that's what it is.
That was Nigel Farage at the launch of the Scottish, the Reform UK Scottish Conference. And here's the thing, Benedict. Nigel Farage says that in certain Muslim countries, public prayer is banned. And in all of the others, it's just not the done thing.
Yeah.
People pray at home and they pray in mosques. The on the street thing, this was a flex. This was a cultural signal. It was nothing to do with God.
It's the funniest thing, the way that those who most espouse the idea of tolerance and multiculturalism in the UK seem to know the very least about the cultures in which they are telling the rest of us we should be accepting and tolerating. This was always, as an aside, the thing that I found the funniest thing about Brexit, when we were told it's very racist, but by a load of people who would never deem to learn Polish or anything like that because they just weren't interested. They just thought everybody else should get on board with this sort of thing. But it's the same thing here, actually.
It's true.
Yeah, you're right. The average sort of Brit who sits there and goes, well, we have to be peaceful and tolerant, and isn't this beastly of Nigel Farage to say this, is not going to be going to anywhere outside of the tourist centres of Morocco or maybe Istanbul. They're not going to be going to anywhere else in that part of the world. They're not going to be paying attention to the political or social conventions of those countries. And you're right, actually, you go to places like Turkey or Morocco, just as examples, or Abu Dhabi or somewhere like that during Ramadan, and you find people out and about in cafes, living their life, being normal. It's only here, actually, that you find everything is sort of being constrained, in order to not offend or to actively promote a certain community. And the irony of this is, just a final little point here, it's become a bit of a non-running joke in the Emirates, in the Gulf states. You don't send your children anymore, if you are an Arab from the Gulf, you don't send your children to be educated at a British university because they might come back in a hijab. That's the joke, which is that Britain increasingly is becoming a hotbed of real sort of hard-line extremism in certain strands of Islam at the exact moment that much of the Muslim world is actually going, cosmopolitanism is quite nice. Tolerance is quite a good thing. So you've got that really weird sort of reversal of
many
roles.
Arab states do not tolerate religious extremism.
They don't. I mean,
they're not big fans of Islamism.
They don't. I mean, at the exact time that Saudi Arabia is opening up and saying you don't have to sort of wear the face veil, you don't need the same restrictions.
Women can drive,
all of that
which
sort of
I
thing.
think, by the way, on that one is a mistake, but that's fine. Each to their own.
I was going to say, is your
should
wife
see
listening this morning?
What Mrs. Dolan has done to the Prius.
I was going to say.
It doesn't look like a Prius anymore.
You see?
It's literally, it's unrecognisable.
We're touching upon some personal
Sainsbury's car park, and it's all on CCTV.
So you get to watch it back again and again and again. But this is exactly the point. The exact moment that so many of these countries...
She needs body work, and I'm not talking about the car. Right, let's crack on. Go on.
We shall. As you say, and they also understand this as well. The authorities in these countries understand what they're dealing with. Again, another example being, I believe it was the former Emirati foreign minister who was saying, listen, you guys are going to end up with a problem. Yeah. They understand their religion pretty well. They understand that it's easy to be very tolerant, to be moderate, but that there are also extremist tendencies. They don't tolerate those tendencies. It's just us and France and Germany to a degree that go, Well, you have to be nice. You have to put up with these people. You have to be tolerant, because otherwise you're an awful bigot.
Well,
And
that's
how
right.
we end up in
It's ironic. These Arab states, they want to have safe, coherent societies. They're worried about terror. They're worried about extremism, and we're not, because we're mugs, because of our pathological empathy. Kemi Badenoch, I've got to say, the Tories have had a sort of very important contribution to this conversation, all kicked off by their Shadow Justice Secretary, Nick Timothy. Well, here's the boss, Kemi Badenoch, on why she thinks that Starmer is condemning her colleague.
This debate, which Nick is having, is not about freedom of religion. It is about how religion is expressed in a shared public space and whether those expressions fit within the norms of British culture. And one of the things that I cannot believe is how Keir Starmer ordered his Labour MPs to pile on him. I will not take lectures from Keir Starmer or Labour on this, because in 2021, Keir Starmer pulled out of an event organised by this very same group, who are highly controversial, and he did so because he was sucking up to British Jews and the Board of Deputies to pretend that the Labour Party had changed. Now, in the wake of Gorton and Denton, he wants to suck up to a different community. This is the mother of all hypocrisy.
Is Sir Keir Starmer sucking up to the British Muslim community? 6:36, this is Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from an unnamed texter. Hello, everyone at Talk. Could we have a regular Mark and Benedict show every Friday morning? Well, unfortunately, Benedict's quite in demand, aren't you, Benedict, on rival networks? But what do you reckon?
One hears of rival networks, I have no idea. But if you would like me, and if the listeners would like me, yes, I would make that time for you.
I'd love it to be the Mark and Benedict show, because you can do all the intellectual heavy lifting. Thank you for that lovely message. We appreciate it. Richard in Northampton, not only does this awful government have the war to blame to hide their incompetence, but they'll be getting the windfall from the tax and VAT on fuel. Merry Christmas, says Richard. This from another texter. Thank you. Your tie is much better and straight, but still not perfect. It's Michael again, fourth generation Irish immigrant. Michael, thank you for that. Patricia, good morning, Mark. I'm not bothered by seeing Muslims pray, but the Trafalgar Square episode was obviously performative. By the way, is Benjamin Netanyahu Israel's Winston Churchill? Richie in Mid-Sussex says, yes, he absolutely is Israel's Churchill. He saved that country. God bless him, Israeli people, and God bless all of them. I'm an ethnic Christian Englishman myself. John says, regarding the Muslim prayer episode in London, I'm of the opinion that the prayer should be done in a place of worship, in this case a mosque. We're constantly having other cultures and beliefs literally rammed down our throats. This is England with English heritage. I've travelled all over the world, and have the greatest respect for the natives and religions of those countries, which adds to the experience of the holiday, and I wouldn't dream of protesting or praying, which might cause disrespect to the locals. This is England. Our culture and heritage should be respected. That's John in Bury. John, I completely agree. I think it's a very well put together argument. Let's take a voice note from Lee on this issue.
Morning, Mark. Lee from Scarborough in his van, veteran. This Muslim malarkey. I feel like a minority in my own country. Nigel Farage, people need to stand up about this, because we are being, honestly, we are going to be a minority soon. This is just not on. And, oh my God, what? We're giving more money away. Yvette Cooper, Mrs. Balls, giving more money away for green schemes. What about us? What about me? I've got gas heating oil, yeah? Doubled in price. I've worked all my life to be marginalised and penalised. Well, something's got to give sooner or later. Great show, Mark. Carry on, fella.
Well, Lee, thank you so much. And you represent what this show and what this channel is all about. You're part of Alarm Clock Britain. You're up in the morning. You're putting a shift in. You put more in than you take out. And you are a former veteran. So can I personally, and on behalf of my audience, thank you for your brave service to this country. Great voice note. Well, you mentioned an important story, and it's breaking this morning. Labour is going to keep spending billions of pounds of UK taxpayers' money on green schemes overseas, despite slashing the foreign aid budget. The Foreign Secretary revealed that the UK will hand out, wait for it, folks, £6 billion, that's your money and mine, over the next 3 years for international climate finance projects. And they're going to aim to generate another £6.5 billion in UK-backed climate and nature-positive investments. We don't even know whether these policies and this investment is going to stop global warming, Benedict.
But there's a chance. There's a chance. There's a 0.0001% chance that it could stop it all. And then Ed Miliband will look like a hero. He'll look like a visionary. I suspect it probably won't, but still, you know, if you take the Labour government's approach to these things, you never know. Honestly, it's a load of nonsense.
It wasn't in the manifesto.
Nothing that they do is in the manifesto.
I mean, if I dare, right, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, give me a call, 03444911000, right? But correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to speak on behalf of you now, watching and listening. But I think you'll agree that when you consider foreign aid, you're not against it per se. It's got to be modest because the country's broke. So, it has to be a sensible amount. But we would have thought, and we would hope, that foreign aid goes to starving children. Yeah. Or communities impacted by a drought or a disaster, flood. Where they got no drinking water. Kids are going blind because of a pathogen. Yeah. That, I think, is something that the public support investment in. Yeah. Not windmills in the Middle East.
What I think is pretty disgraceful is that this government, this Labour Party, is the first one that will turn around and shriek about how many people there are in poverty in this country and how that is all the fault of the evil Tories. And that, the one that they always say is child poverty, that there are millions of children in poverty in this country. And then we get and we're going to be giving away tens of billions or however much it is for all sorts of pet projects. I think that's pretty disgraceful because they will weaponise the suffering of people already here to beat political opponents with, and then willingly give that money away to people who are not in this country. Well, if there is child poverty in this country, then there shouldn't be a penny going into overseas aid until that has been alleviated. You cannot actually say to the people you are entrusted to rule over and to govern and say, sorry chaps, you're gonna have to just be poor a little longer because we want to give this money away to other people. The issue with a lot of this is foreign aid is a pet project of what you would call the NGO class, the non-governmental organisation class. This idea that Britain post-empire has an important role to play around the world. We don't have an empire anymore, but we're going to make amends for it by going and helping lots of other people, which is ironic because that's basically what the empire was as well. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel positive. A lot of these people who work in the civil service and then they work in the private sector or the charity sector, they are friends of MPs. Many of them have been MPs. They all work in the same sort of networks, and it makes them feel good. You want to sort of of punish these people actually for their broader performance as people who run this country, it should be in law, actually. It should be made the case that you cannot give any money away to these sorts of things. Not a penny of the public's money given to overseas aid or anything like that until, by the government's own metrics, there is no, what they say, child poverty, which means broad poverty anyway, but it sounds better as a marketing strategy, until there is no child poverty in this country. Do that, then you can start frittering it away on your pet projects. But until then, not a penny.
Well, £6 billion would pay for 193,000 police officers.
How about that?
I mean, if that wouldn't, Christian Mitchell, unilaterally end crime in this country, 200,000 coppers
Well,
is what you would get.
I don't think it would end crime in this country, but I tell you what, a lot more spicy tweets will be getting reported. Oh, boy.
Oh, tell me about it. That's a good point. 182,000 teachers. You'd have 160,000 prison officers, which would be very good. And how about this? £6 billion would deliver 10 massive flagship hospitals across the country. 10. So Manchester gets a new hospital, Belfast, Glasgow, Cardiff, London, Manchester, Birmingham.
All the things that you can do with this.
10
all the things that you can do with this. It's just, honestly, as I say, it's a vanity thing. It's a vanity thing. It makes them, the politicians, the civil servants and the NGO class, it makes them feel good to take your money, everybody who's listening, your money, and give it away to these things. And they get the photo ops and they get all that sort of thing. It makes them feel good.
But also, I don't see how windmills and solar panels help starving children in Africa. And I don't think that it gets medicine to mothers who are going to die in childbirth.
Well, do you want to know the irony about a lot of this?
Is that actually
this idea that Africa is full of starving children doesn't really exist anymore. Because actually, I mean, obviously there are starving children in Africa, but this idea that there is sort of perpetual mass famine and drought in many of the places that there used to be, it's not the case anymore because the world has moved on, technology has moved on. We're getting pretty good at being able to grow enough food and ship it in to these places. The irony is actually that the energy crisis in the Gulf is more likely to sort of disrupt things like food supplies to Africa than anything we do can possibly has an effect on. But that's the sort of the thing. And as you say, trying to sort of build windmills or infrastructure or something like that, I'm sorry, but let them do that. The whole point of the end of colonialism, the end of empire, is so that countries can stand on their own 2 feet and they can decide what they do with their money. Why are we then going in and telling them, we'll build you some infrastructure, but only the infrastructure that we like, and we're not going to tell you necessarily how to operate it or whether or not it's profitable or worthwhile. We're just going to do it. That's a nuts idea.
Yeah, we're helping with green projects overseas whilst China and India and Brazil are burning fossil fuel for fun, literally as a sport. It's like a weekend hobby.
Yeah. Canada is opening up new liquid natural gas exportation facilities. The United States is doubling down on its fossil fuel production. Did you know China is now the world's 4th or 5th largest oil producer? It wasn't even in the top 20 a decade ago. Does that sound like a country that's decarbonising to you?
We are mugs. You're listening to Talk Breakfast. It is 6:47. Is Kemi Badenoch right that the public should intervene and stop shoplifters? Would you risk life and limb to save a jar of Nescafe Gold Blend from being nicked? That's next. think Donald Trump has a plan post-war?
A couple of weeks ago, when he started this off, he made a speech saying help would be on the way for the people. There was going to be regime change.
He appointed Mandelson against advice. We know this to be true. If this was a Conservative Prime Minister, the wider left would be absolutely screaming for his resignation.
Government's announced this afternoon, we're setting up a people's panel to work out exactly how you want us to roll out these digital IDs. We don't want them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is public Muslim prayer at odds with British culture? Here's a voice note from Perry.
Morning, Mark. I know they say Muslims should be allowed to pray anywhere they want, whether or not they do or not, it's not down to me. But what about if we had a load of Christians go to Whitechapel and had some big, massive Christian fete go on? Because weren't that long ago where there was someone who was approached and was told to go away, this is a Muslim area, and that young lady policeman stood up for the guy and said, if you don't want to listen to the preacher, then move away. So if it happened in Whitechapel, Christians, what happened then?
A brilliant point. Perry, thank you for your voice note. Keep them coming. The double standards are all over the place, aren't they? More bad headlines for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the artist formerly known as Prince Andrew. A police investigation into the King's younger brother may widen to assess potential corruption offences as well as other concerns in regard to the trafficking of children. So let's get reaction from Talk's brilliant royal correspondent Rupert Bell. Good morning, Rupert.
Good morning, Mark.
Anyone that was hoping that that was the beginning of the end of the allegations facing Andrew will have to think again.
No, this was never going to be just get him arrested and then think it will be washed away. And obviously with all the other stuff that's going on, perhaps it's no longer quite as forefront in the public consciousness. However, for the for the Met Police, they have obviously decided this misuse in public office is the first thing they've been looking at. But now, as you say, they're widening it to possibly include corruption, particularly when it is his time when he was a trade envoy. Was he passing on sensitive information? And that is, but this will take a long time. So for Andrew, while he's holed up in Norfolk, he's still going to have to be concerned about where this investigation could lead, particularly with further revelations coming out about Jeffrey Epstein. There's also allegations with what may have been going on with some of the women who were involved and how that is going to play out as far as an investigation is concerned. So for Andrew, this is a continuation of the uneasy times.
Allegations of sex trafficking, allegations of corruption, allegations of misconduct in a public office. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor could conceivably go to jail.
He could, if he's found guilty. Look, he's always protested his innocence against all these allegations. So the court would be the place to actually prove his take on it, that he is innocent. And we do have in this country, the rule is you're innocent until proven guilty. So yet the court of public opinion has a very different view of Andrew. Hence the reason why the King and others have taken the steps to, as you say, make him the artist formerly known as Prince Andrew. So it is a very difficult time. And for the royal family, a court case would be damaging, I don't know, but it would be very uncomfortable for them because, some of their roles within Andrew's life we may find out who bankrolled and paid that money to Virginia Giuffre. Did the king know? All sorts of things could come out, which would make it very uncomfortable for the rest of the royal family.
And allegations of corruption, arguably worse than the previous allegation of misconduct in a public office, because there's something willful about corruption.
Absolutely. And so if he is seen to be doing that, then, as you quite rightly say, now he is a normal citizen, then he could be found guilty, and that could mean that he faces a jail sentence. But this is going to take a long time to come anywhere near going to court. So don't expect it any time soon to be coming up charges to be pressed if the Thames Police continue. Because, as you know, fraud cases are incredibly difficult to prove. Yeah. You've got to be forensic in your investigation. And Andrew, just like any other citizens, would expect the case to be with due diligence, not just to grab a few public headlines.
Benedict Spence is with me in the studio. Benedict, do you think that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor will ever face justice? Is it conceivable that he could wind up in the slammer?
It is conceivable, but it's just one of those things where, given the nature of the allegations, as Rupert just sort of said, but also given everything else that's going on around this story, this scandal, it's going to be a torturous process. I mean, what we can certainly say is, in terms of facing justice, his reputation will never recover. It's impossible that would ever happen. So whatever life he would have liked to have had, that's not coming back.
You don't think he's going to be appearing on the next £5 banknotes?
Sadly not, unless he wishes to reinvent himself as a badger, which, to be fair, he might be turfed out of his cottage, at which point there's only one thing left for him, which is the local set.
Well, he loves a bit of beaver, and other
so
wildlife.
Exactly.
Squirrels, of course.
Exactly.
And gerbils.
Needs to find himself a little foxhole somewhere, really get out of the public eye. But, it's one of those things where, again, it's just going to be elongated, dragged out. It's going to be hideously embarrassing for him, even if nothing else comes from that. So I think, there is a semblance of justice there, that sort of justice that's felt that, broadly speaking, the public dislike him and that they feel that he has behaved appallingly in his sort of personal life, regardless of whatever charges might have been. But there are plenty of allegations about sort of, his personal behaviour, his personal sort of character. He wasn't the most popular man anyway, but whether or not he actually faces justice, whether or not he's ever charged or anything and ends up inside a court, I don't know about.
But Rupert, my viewers and listeners, and you'll totally relate to this, will be furious that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's potential prosecution will be tortuous and long and may never happen, because my viewers and listeners know that if they drive too quickly or commit some other offence, they'll have their collar felt and they will serve their time. It feels, doesn't it, like one rule for the elite and another for the rest of us?
I may take issue with you slightly there, because the due process, he is still a citizen, and this is, as Benedict just said, this is going to be incredibly difficult to investigate. So it will take time because of all the serious nature of the allegations. You can't rush this through, just as anyone would else expect. So yes, it may seem like it's taking a long time, but it mustn't be brushed under the carpet.
But isn't it slower because he's the king's brother? That's what many will think.
Well, they may think that, but we can only judge by what's going on within Thames Valley. And I have no idea what resources they're putting to this to make sure that it's a due process and doesn't take forever. Because you say, yes, people want natural justice, the justice to come to fruition. And if it means it goes to court and they can find, they believe they've got a case to put against Andrew now, then they will proceed. But it must be done forensically. And just like any other citizen would expect, if the police are going to prosecute you, they must do their due diligence, just as Andrew must do his due diligence in defence.
Fair point, Rupert. I will take that. Andrew, by the way, has moved house. What's the story here, Rupert?
You caught me on the hop here. I haven't seen that. Why has he moved again?
Well, just make it up, Rupert.
No, I don't want to. I'll be truthful.
It's going to wind up in the Daily Express.
He's got a new palace in Tehran, haven't you heard? Recently vacated.
Well, air conditioning may be pretty good.
He's actually in a council flat in East London, in a quite strongly Muslim area, and he'll be praying publicly on a daily basis, apparently.
The new mayor of Tower Hamlets.
No, Mark. But probably, I think there have been some decorations going on in various houses. Temporary farmhouses, I think, at the moment. Wood Farm, I think, is where he was to begin with. And then maybe there's another one doing up, which now might have done
well, while we're on the accommodation, he's got to live somewhere. And so Sandringham is still likely the viable long-term solution for him to live. Is that right?
Well, in Norfolk, yes, on the Sandringham estate. And what will be the interesting thing? Who will be paying for that? Will he be paying a normal rent? You know, all these things the public may think, well, what's the king doing? You know, it's very difficult because he's innocent until proven guilty. And that's the problem for the king, because he's dealing with his brother.
Rupert, always the highlight of the show when you appear. Thank you so much for your time. Lots more to come. This is Talk.
Hello from Crowborough, where the local residents are enraged with what has happened to their community merely overnight, when just 27 single male asylum seeker illegal migrants were bussed into their military training camp. Behind me are local residents, people from all over the country. Shabana Mahmood has said that this is an effective way of getting rid of those expensive, flashy asylum hotels. But unfortunately, these people are still placed within the community.
Whole town is very afraid because these are unvetted men from countries that are, the government warn us not to go to.
I've got an 18-year-old daughter and she gets the bus opposite the camp. Do you feel safe for her? No, so that will have to stop. Right. We'll either have to wait with her or take her to wherever she needs to go.
The reason I'm here today is because I live in Crowborough and my family, I've got a wife and children, and just worried about, my wife walking to work and my sons, walking about. Anything can happen, can't it, that nowadays and age, what's going on, what's happening in this country. So I'm just concerned and frightened,
There was support from other towns, other communities, because of course Shabana Mahmood has threatened other communities, and she said they're going to open site after site after site. Well, I would hope that if she's going to try and do that, she learns some lessons about the way she's done it in Crowborough, because this is not finished. We are not finished objecting to this plan.
Grover says no! Grover says no! Grover says no!
We would urge her to reconsider, and whatever she does, she needs to talk to the people that she's imposing these things on.
If you had a direct line to Keir Starmer and Shabana Mahmood, what would you say to them?
Look after your most vulnerable first. It's your priority to look after your vulnerable.
If they're bringing illegal immigrants into a camp in the dead of night, why are they doing that? They're doing that because it's disingenuous, it's dishonest, it's covert, and they're trying to keep the reality away from the local community of what they're actually doing to us. We've now got to the end of the entrance to the camp, we've got cameras, we've got police drones, it's like a cloud.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Top of the morning, 3 minutes past 7. Talk breakfast. Happy Friday, one and all. Breaking this morning, Nigel Farage steps into the Muslim public prayer row, saying such displays of dominance are unacceptable and should be banned. Meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch says the Prime Minister is sucking up to British Muslims. Is she right? U-turn number 19, 19, as the Prime Minister is expected to scrap plans to toughen immigration rules around indefinite leave to remain. But will granting citizenship to the Boris wave cost the taxpayer tens of billions of pounds? And if so, did you vote for that? There's a surprise. The one in, one out illegal immigrants are coming back to Britain on lorries. And the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, has said that the public should intervene and stop shoplifters. So would you risk life and limb to save a jar of Nescafe Gold Blend from being nicked? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Tommy is taking your calls. Sam is our lead engineer, making me sound sensational this morning. Christian Mitchell, the most experienced producer in commercial speech radio, is directing the output. Plus, if you want to watch the show, you've got Nahar to thank for that. All you got to do is head to YouTube, search Talk, and up we pop. And as the saying goes, let's talk. DAB+, in-app, online and via YouTube. This is Talk Breakfast, and so much to get through in the next 3 hours. At 9 a.m, Dolan's Dispatch, I'll be dealing with this issue of public Muslim prayer. But of course, Nigel Farage has stepped into the row. Let's take a listen to the leader of Reform UK with his remarks on this very subject.
I've never seen Jewish services taking place in places of historic Christian worship or anywhere else. Look, we have to get this right. You know, we can't stop individuals praying. We wouldn't want to stop individuals praying. But mass prayer is banned. Mass Muslim prayer is banned in many Muslim countries in the Middle East itself. So yes, we have to stop this kind of mass demonstration, provocative demonstration in historic British sites, because that's what it is.
Caroline has messaged the show. Good morning, Mark. This is a simple question. Were these prayers in Trafalgar Square happening last year? Were these prayers being taken the year before last in Trafalgar Square? If not, then obviously this was meant to upset people this year. Thank you for that. We've also got Tim. Mark, a strange thing and a strange location for Muslims to pray at. Why would they want to pray at the base of our greatest naval leader and the lions symbolising British strength? Lol, says Tim. Yeah, and of course, in front of a rather important Church of England church as well. Here's a voice note from Jane on this issue.
Sucking up to Muslims, oh my God. He bows down to them at every opportunity. It's disgusting. What about the British people? I hope when the time comes, hopefully sooner rather than later, at the next general election, every one of the silent majority stand up and let their voices be heard at that ballot box. Because I tell you something, that man is going to lead us somewhere where I don't want to think about.
Jane, thank you for your voice note. Keep the voice notes coming, keep the calls coming in and the texts. I've got a simple question this morning. Is public Muslim prayer compatible with British culture? And is the Prime Minister sucking up to British Muslims? Who better to ask than Talk's international editor, enjoying the relative safety of London this morning. Hi, Isabel.
Good morning.
It's great to see you. First of all, what do you make of Nigel Farage's intervention here, suggesting that such public displays of prayer should be banned?
Well, I don't like banning things, and I know that he doesn't like banning things either. It's very unconservative with a small c. We're liberals in that sense, instinctively. But I'm afraid things have gone so far in the UK now that I'm ready to contemplating banning a whole catalogue of behaviours and activities that once upon a time I would have thought that we would hold absolutely dear and unstoppable. So certain types of public protests I've had enough of. I think many people in the country have had enough of aggressive public protests dominated by the waving of foreign flags and horrible symbols. And as for this public praying thing, I mean, what a pity to have arrived at the place where we've arrived at, where people praying is perceived as an act of aggression. And I'm afraid I think it is an act of aggression. We don't see, as many of your callers and contributors have pointed out this morning, we don't see other religions doing this. My own view is that praying is a very private thing. Of course, in Christianity, and in fact in all religions, collective worship is a thing, but collective worship is done within certain sacred settings, namely churches, namely mosques, and it's done in that kind of private and very special way. I don't really believe in performative praying. Were those people on the streets really thinking about Allah when they were doing that demo, or were they thinking about some kind of political agenda? I think Sadiq Khan made a big mistake by putting himself in the centre of that demonstration. I don't like it.
It was messaging, wasn't it, Isabel? It was a flex. It was a clear message, we're here and we're here to stay, and it was in direct competition with British values.
Well, yes, and I find it terrifying, actually, the pace at which this is happening in our country. I think in the space of a year alone, culturally, we've changed a lot. You know, I had a message from somebody
ever since October the 7th, would you say?
And I think it's accelerated. You know, I think the first year after that, you know, that was an adjustment, and now this is accelerating, and it's meeting no resistance whatsoever from our leaders. On the contrary, it is being actively encouraged and promoted, as we see there by Sadiq Khan. I mean, I had a message yesterday via an intermediary from a parent who was distressed that their child in a Church of England school had been made to get onto a prayer mat and bow down to Allah. Now, I'm sure they weren't being told they had to believe that, and I'm sure it was some kind of lesson in what Muslims do, but we don't need that in our Church of England schools. We don't need Islam being fully integrated in that way into our curriculum. Of course, I believe that everybody should learn about other faiths. That's part of a basic education. But we should not be required to tack and turn according to the Islamic calendar. There's too many schools now celebrating Eid, asking pupils to do different times of day according to that. Where I live normally in the UAE, my children go to school out there. It's a British school. They have to observe the calendar as it is in the UAE, which involves the Muslim festivals, quite rightly.
Correct.
But this is the UK, folks. This is the UK. If you want to live in the Middle East, live in the Middle East. If you want to live in a Muslim country, you're free to do that. But when you're in the UK, this is who we are. We are a Christian country. I want to hear church bells, not the call to prayer. I love the call to prayer, but in the Middle East. Thank you.
In Dubai, British children, British Christian children can't skip Good Friday in that country, can they?
So what happens in Dubai is that that they have a very clear sense of who they are. Now, it's going through a very difficult time at the moment, but it doesn't shake who they are. And I think this is what's gone so badly wrong in the UK, that we've lost the basic framework of who we are in the UK and what that means, and the rules that we are all required to sign up to. Nice thing in Dubai in the last 24, 48 hours, they've begun putting up billboards saying we are all Emiratis here. And actually, the Emirati population in Dubai is really small.
That would get you cancelled in the UK. That would be a far right slogan. We are all British here, wouldn't it?
Important. We have to decide what keeps us together. And these types of public displays are not displays of unity. They are displays of difference, and they are aggressive. And I just think, on that note, we shouldn't have them. And I regret the idea of having to ban things.
Yeah.
But this has gone way too far. And I'm going to keep on saying it. It's time to ban protests which involve the waving of foreign flags. If you want a foreign flag, then by all means have that. But you must have a union flag with it. This has gone too far.
So you think that Nigel Farage is right to want to ban public Muslim prayer, that you see this sort of display as incompatible with British culture, or even an assault on British culture?
I think it's time for us to become robustly British, and it's time for us to work out what that means. And there are certain fundamentals, and minorities have become so over-empowered, not in a way that makes them equal, in a way that gives them special treatment, that we need a correction now. And I think we need to sit down and work out what those parameters are, and we need to robustly impose them. That's not going to happen under this government.
We know you're busy as well, but stay with us for a couple of minutes if you can, because with me in the studio, Benedict Spence, political commentator. Is public Muslim prayer an assault on British culture?
I think this sort of thing, sits very poorly with a lot of people because it is the double standard at play. You can't have, for instance, people being prosecuted for praying quietly, Christians praying quietly in public, and yet this is completely acceptable. I think that's the key thing.
Or preaching the gospel.
I think people would like
quoting the Bible in a town square and getting your collar felt.
Yeah, I think people would at least like the consistency. So if we're going to have moments of sort of mass Muslim prayer, you have to allow people to have large, overt displays of Christian worship as well, which very clearly the authorities of this country do not feel very comfortable with. And I think it's a very important thing here, talking about the loss of British identity. I don't think it's the loss of it so much. It's not like we dropped it. I think it's the active attempt to erode it by the state, by institutions in this country. It is. I know that we all had a bit of a laugh about the idea of taking Churchill off our money the other day and replacing it with whatever animal it was. But it's things like that. It's the gradual just sort of chipping away at things that do represent us, and the things that we do have in common, the shared values that we did have in common, the shared history that we do have in common, and the replacement with the idea that it's a smorgasbord and you can have anything and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because we're all kind of the same. It's not true. It's not true at all.
And Isabel, we have millions of amazing British Muslims in this country who start businesses. They are our friends, our neighbours, our lovers, you name it. And I would have thought that moderate Muslims weren't too happy with that spectacle in Trafalgar Square either.
Well, we make this point pretty much every day on Talk, and that is that most Muslims are moderate in this country, but unfortunately we have a kind of a stream of Islam in this country that is entirely tolerated, that is much more extreme, and it isn't tolerated in parts of the Middle East where they understand how unhealthy this is. That all links to the tolerance that we have in the UK of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is an extremist Islam interpretation. Other countries, including the UAE, prescribe the Muslim Brotherhood, but guess what? We don't. We seem to think that crosses a line in some ways. So tolerance, I'm afraid, is actually overrated if you want a high-functioning, happy country. And I don't think that anyone really who lives in Britain could say that at this point Britain is happy and united. It isn't.
And Benedict, brief last word on this.
This is all the sort of thing that leads to political fragmentation and social fragmentation. And I think it's very ironic that for however many years in this country, our elites, our media elites, political elites have told us you have to do X, Y, Z thing because otherwise the mythical, dangerous, ugly far right will come out of nowhere and they'll turn it into the Fourth or Fifth Reich or whatever, whatever hellhole it's going to be. And then they double down on allowing things that are more likely to polarize people and push them to the extremes. That's the thing that has always wound me up the most about all of this. The very people who are enabling that future are the ones sat here going, no, we're the good guys, and it's how everybody else reacts to these policies who are in the wrong.
Isabel, thank you so much for joining us. Always a treat to have you on the programme, and also in the relative safety of London as well. Isabel Oakeshott is Talk's international editor, and Benedict Spence, a political commentator. I understand you're going to be speaking to an imam later, is that right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Looking forward to that. Folks, so much more to come. Is Muslim public prayer compatible with British culture? It is 7:19. This is Talk Breakfast.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel
raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of its desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
An interesting message from Zarina about public Muslim prayer. She's effectively saying, what about Christian prayer? Zarina says, good morning, Mark. People in the public eye need to lead by example. They should attend church every Sunday. The public then might be encouraged to attend. Schools might begin to return to Christian assemblies. What are these people in power waiting for? Shared values is what we need. Well, I completely agree. And by the way, the Church of England, the official church of this country, deafening in their silence about this cultural flex that we've seen from a couple of thousand Muslim men praying at Trafalgar Square, something that doesn't even happen in Muslim countries. This from an unnamed texter. Good morning, Mark. Do the Muslims educate their children in Christian and British culture? I look forward to seeing the LGBTQ plus celebrations from all mosques in Britain soon. And how about this from Sam? Good morning, Sam. Sam writes, Mark, I've lived in multiple countries in the Middle East and I see more Islamic extremism in the UK than I've ever seen here. I see more women covered up in the UK than in the Middle East. They don't tolerate praying in the streets in the Middle East for the very reason that Nick Timothy mentioned. The region would not tolerate the behaviour that you see from a lot of the Muslim community in this country. They know overseas in Muslim countries how dangerous it can be, and they keep it reined in and don't allow it to get a hold. In the region, no one can believe that we are so soft and what we're allowing as we know the consequences, but our political class and the left are so terrified of being called Islamophobic that they are prepared to put our country values and our society at risk so they can pretend to be morally superior. What happened in Trafalgar Square was about dominance, power, control and intimidation. And Sam says it's time the UK woke up. 7:24 Talk Breakfast live in the studio now. Jennifer Ewing from Republicans Overseas UK. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, how are you?
So good to see you. Now, you were a big Trump cheerleader, very keen for him to win the last election to beat Kamala Harris. But are you having buyer's regret now that he's invaded Iran?
Absolutely not. Although I do disagree with invading Iran. So two things can be true at the same time. And let's not be under any illusions that if Kamala Harris had won the presidency, I think we'd probably be at war with Russia right now. So if you listen to her DNC convention in the lead up to the 2024 election, you know, they sounded like the party of war cheering. And
the Democrats loved the war in Ukraine.
Yes, they did.
And they loved saber rattling regarding the Kremlin.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think to think we'd be at peace with her as president is not true. What is concerning, however, as somebody that voted for the president twice, the first time he ran, I voted for the Libertarian candidate. So that kind of shows you a little my place in the Republican Party, is that he very much voted on no new wars that were not existential to the United States. So this is a problem for a lot of the Trump coalition, however you want to define that.
But he's disarming a wicked regime which threatens instability in the Middle East, which is going to be much worse for inflation and gas prices than this short war.
Well, I hope it is a short war. And if it is, I mean, obviously we back the troops. We want the United States to do as well as possible. But, you know, we're being slow-walked into this. We're not going to give you a timeline. You know, this was not going to be troops on the ground, which the president has restated that there won't be. But, again, this is not what a lot of people who voted for the president voted for. And the reason is because as long as we're talking about Sunni Shia or this cleric or, you know, this oil depot, we're not talking about the top issues that Americans voted for, which are close the border, which he got an A+ for. He's
because
done
12
extremely
million
well.
people entered America illegally during the Biden years.
Yeah, I'm a buyer of 12 million. I mean, I think it's definitely more than
excess
that.
More than that?
Well, yes.
But millions.
I mean, millions of people illegally. Yes, exactly. So people were fed up with that. That was an issue that I think even Democrats will not overturn should they get back in power, okay? Because people are like, it's just... Plus, it hurts the people who are coming there legally. You know, America is made up of immigrants and legal immigrants. So actually, when people are just let in without going through the process, it hurts the people that are waiting in line.
Of course it does, and it's unsafe because many of them statistically are going to be murderers, drug dealers, and worse. Not sure what's worse than a murderer, but you take my point. If Donald Trump was UK Prime Minister, would he stop the boats?
Yeah, absolutely, of course. And he'd probably thinking, what's the difficulty that, you know, this is an island. So, yes, he would stop the boats.
And what did you make of his comments on St. Patrick's Day about the UK in regard to net zero and open borders?
Yeah, you know...
I mean, this is a guy that seems to care more about our country than our own Prime Minister.
Well, you know, I think... if you're to look back at when Trump was re-elected, the way in which the special relationship was going to be vulnerable, and I remember a colleague of mine and I were asked to go give evidence to the House of Lords about the special relationship, you could easily see we're going in three different directions. Number one, on energy security, right? America's Joe Baby Jill, and the UK is very much still net zero. That was both Conservatives and Labour. And number two, closing the border to illegal immigrants. So our countries have diverged in their policies in that way. And I think what the president is saying is you cannot get back to prosperity, safety, any of the things that are important to the people of the UK unless you, first of all, you know, have energy security, and number two, you know, just border security.
Donald Trump is mystified as an entrepreneur. He's mystified that we have oil, gas, and coal reserves that we're not tapping into. He can't believe it.
Yeah.
It's like having access to gold and not touching it.
Well,
liquid gold.
I don't know about you, but when I get my energy bill every month,
it's horrific.
I'm mystified too. You know, I'm really mystified, and it doesn't make sense because you can't have energy security. You can't have national security with that.
We're buying it from Norway.
You're buying it from the United States.
And the United States, the shale gas, which, by the way, under woke Obama was the guy that granted the shale licenses. Because the Americans have common sense, unlike us. Well, listen, let's talk about Pearl Harbor, because, of course, this was the Japanese surprise military attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on the 7th of December, 1941. It was the main reason why the U.S. entered the Second World War. Well, Donald Trump decided to make a bit of humor around that. Take a listen.
We went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted... surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? You know, he's asking me, no, you believe in surprise, I think much more so than us. And we had to surprise him, and we did.
What do you make of Donald Trump's jokes there about Pearl Harbor, this awful attack on American soil in Hawaii in the Second World War? Was it appropriate?
Was it appropriate? Probably not. But was it something that is to be expected from the president? Absolutely. He does not do normal diplomacy. He very much says whatever he thinks off the cuff, whether it's true, whether it's not true, whether it's offensive. So, you know, depending on who you ask, either people thought, oh my God, I probably shouldn't laugh at that, but that was kind of crazy and provocative and funny, or people will say that was outrageous. But anybody who is still outraged about how the president conducts his diplomacy, hasn't been paying attention for the last 10 years.
Given the ferocity of the Pearl Harbor military attack, what a moment it was in American history, a dark day for America. Is it the right thing to joke about it? Does it suggest that Trump is not fit for high office if he's going to make jokes about what was a national tragedy?
Again, you know what? I did not vote for President Trump, nor did a lot of people, because we love the fact that he uses inappropriate, bombastic, often unpresidential language. We voted for him to close the border, get the economy back on track, look after America's interests. So, and you know
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
You know what?
Really.
In an ideal world, yes. You know, one day we'll go back to perhaps presidents that are more eloquent in the way they speak and less offensive. But we are what we are.
We look at the bigger picture, isn't it?
We look at the bigger
Americans
picture.
were struggling for 4 years under Biden, and what's he done? He's he's improved the terms by which America trades with the world. He's closed us on the border, got rid of wokery in America's public institutions, and scrapped the last remnants of net zero. So America is energy independent. It's not too bad, I would argue. Jennifer, let me ask you about a split in the coalition between the United States and Israel in regard to a strike on an energy location in Iran. Is there a division now, do you think, within this coalition about what's happening in Iran between America and Israel?
Sure. I think, yes, you can say that. And I think Netanyahu probably would say that. The president would say that. Because how do you go into a war with a partner, right? Both who seem to have control in some way of making decisions. And there are different outcomes that are wanted. You know, the president of the United States' stated outcome is to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, to prevent Iran from using ballistic missiles. That's the stated purpose as of now. And I think Israel has a different stated purpose, which is probably regime change and something completely opposite. I probably think that divergence was shown to the world, when was it, 2 Saturdays ago, when there was the bombing done by Israel that the U.S. said they did not know about, and with the oil depot, and we have specifically said, stay away from those oil depots, and then you'll see that happened again with everything in Qatar. So let's see what happens, but this was never going to be easy because we're two different countries with very different objectives, I would say.
Jennifer, a deep privilege to have you here live in the studio. Thank you for coming in so early to join us for a very important conversation about what's happening in the Middle East. Do come back and see us again soon. Jennifer Ewing is the spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK. Thank you, Jennifer. Matt Vickers is the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, no less. He joins us now. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Mark.
Very good to see you. Is your boss, Kemi Badenoch, right that Sir Keir Starmer is sucking up to British Muslims by actually being very positive about that public display of prayer at Trafalgar Square?
I think you've got to look at the Prime Minister and where he goes with this. So this all came out and he started making a lot of noise at PMQs whilst he was under pressure, being asked a question that he refused to answer 4 times. He was asked whether he met Peter Mandelson to discuss his association with that prolific paedophile before appointing him. He refused to answer the question 4 times, completely diverted with any which story he could, and this was one of the ones he pulled out. The reality is that we've seen what happened in Gorton and Denton. All of a sudden, Keir Starmer seems to have very strong views about certain groups in society. Actually, this specific group, he'd refused to engage with them before when he was trying to convince people that his party was not anti-Semitic. So he's kind of picking and choosing. This debate isn't about whether people have the right to follow a faith in this country, the freedom to their own religious expression and beliefs. That is a given in this country. We, as a country, as a society, allow people to follow their own faiths and beliefs. This is about what happens in a public space and whether one group should be allowed to lock it off, close it off, and restrict access to others, to separate out men and women and people of different faiths. It's not what we want to see. Nick Timothy was entirely right to call it out.
Yeah, Matt, what did you think when you saw that footage of a couple of thousand, mainly Muslim men praying at Trafalgar Square. Just as a human being, what went through your mind when you saw those pictures?
I think when you see areas, I mean, this is one of our most shared public spaces. People from all over the world visit, people from all over the country visit. It's a huge open space with a hell of a lot of history about this country. And then to see part of it fenced off, separated off, where people of different genders, people of different faiths, of different beliefs are unable to enter certain areas is wrong. You know what, we see people bring all sorts of celebrations and ceremonies for people to engage openly, inclusively in that space from different faiths, and that's the way it should be. This sort of division, this separation, segregation is completely wrong. It's not what our shared public spaces should be about.
Meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch has suggested that she would tackle a shoplifter if they're not too big, which of course is pretty smart. But what would you think? What would you say to my viewers and listeners? Do you think they should risk life and limb to prevent a jar of Nescafe Gold Blend being nicked?
To be fair, you wouldn't want to mess with Kemi. She's a woman with backbone. I wouldn't want to be chased by Kemi.
No way.
I think the reality is that actually, as a community, we do need to look at these things and how we actually take a role in trying. It's about not putting yourself at significant personal risk, but we should engage. We should call out bad behaviour. I used to run shops for a living. I've had many a scrap with a shoplifter on the floor over all sorts of things that might have been going out the door. I think it was the right thing to do. I think it put them off. I think it shared, it's about our responsibilities to keep our public spaces safe. But bigger than that, the Conservatives committed with a funded plan to put 10,000 more police on our streets and treble the number of Stockton searches so we can take those knives, take those drugs off our high streets.
Matt, what was your technique when you manhandled these shoplifters? Was it a right hook? Was it a rugby tackle? Take us through it.
Well, you would always start with trying to talk them out of what they were about to do when you caught them at the door or making a move. And you try to do it in the most sensible way possible. I mean, the reality is actually 5 or 10 years down the line, there are a lot more of those people who now carry needles or knives or are more violent or are off their faces and all sorts of drugs. So it probably is increasingly dangerous to what it was. But there still is a level where people can engage and try to help uphold the law, and in right in doing it, we should celebrate them and support them.
Let me tell you that Matt Vickers, by the sounds of it, gives Batman a run for his money. Keeping order.
I'll be the Robin
in Gotham City. Superman, can you fly as well?
I'll give it a go.
Listen, it was great to have you on the show. Thank you for your valuable time. Matt Vickers is the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, who broadly supports his boss's suggestion that the public, when it's safe to do so, should intervene with shoplifters. But what do you think? Would you stop a shoplifter? Would you risk life and limb to save a jar of Nescafe Gold Blend from being stolen? I think the problem you've got, Christian, is twofold. First of all, as Matt said, you don't know if they've got a knife. And secondly, you could probably get arrested for apprehending a shoplifter because the law now seems to work in favour of the criminal, and that's the big concern. So is public Muslim prayer incompatible with British culture? I'm delighted to welcome an imam and broadcaster, Ajmal Masroor. Good morning, sir, and welcome to Talk Breakfast.
Good morning. I want to give you a preamble before we start.
Please do.
We have got our Eid celebration going on, which is our festival after the 30 days of fasting, in our school, in our mosque, in our public space in Southgate. So anybody who is concerned about if they can come and join us, Muslims, non-Muslims, people of faith and no faith, all welcome. It's a lie. It's a made-up story that Muslims do not include anyone to come and join them in their prayers. And it's also a lie to suggest that Muslims are segregating. When we are praying in Trafalgar Square, we invite everybody to join. So that was a lie made by the person from the Conservative Party. Then do I expect anything different from Conservative Party that is ridden with Islamophobia and racism at the moment?
So, first of all, I'm glad that you mentioned that, and I congratulate you and your fellow worshippers at this very important time of the year. But many people think that it's not that common for Muslim prayer to happen in such a public setting. Normally it happens at home or in the mosque.
Well, Timothy should wake up and smell the coffee. The same public square is often taken by people of other faith, Jewish communities, the Hindu communities, Sikh communities, people of faith and no faith. It's a public space. Anybody can take it. Nobody can block it off. That's not true. And secondly, just not to make your program any dull, I'll be running to the mosque because the congregational prayer is just finishing and they're waiting for me to go and deliver the sermon. My sermon is going to be, Britain is our home. We are British citizens. We're here to make a difference, and we will make a difference equally like everyone else is. And we care about this country and our people of this country. And on this day of Eid, on this day of celebration, we are saying to British public, Eid Mubarak. Have a fantastic one. Go and see your British Muslim neighbour. Wish them well. Join in their festivities. And don't worry, there are too many people too upset and too unhappy. Today is a day of happiness. Join us and celebrate Eid.
Most of my viewers and listeners have no problem with people of all faiths practicing what they believe. They're not too happy to see it happening at a national monument like Trafalgar Square.
Well, I don't think that is true, my friend. I think people are not unhappy. It's Mr. Nick Timothy, and some of those Conservative Party or Reform Party's members who are upset with it because they've got a problem under... it's like what we say, bees under their bonnet. For some reason, they got an allergic reaction to the word Islam and the Muslims. I've got something to tell them. Don't be allergic. Don't be worried. Stay calm and be British. We are completely... very tolerant people, we're inclusive, we're multicultural, we celebrate the diversity. Don't have to have such allergy and anxiety about Muslims. We're not here to take over. We're here to make a difference. We've made a difference in the lives of people of Europe for years and years, and we will continue making so. And all these empty gestures or loud speaking will not make any difference. Just speak to your neighbours. You'll get to know Islam and the Muslims far better than you already know.
Why, however, would a recent poll of Jewish people offer up a figure that 80% of Jewish Brits, British Jewish people, 80% believe that Britain is a Christian country, 37% of British Muslims.
I've got to go to pray.
All right.
Look up yourself.
We
Good
wish
luck,
you well,
bye-bye.
and thank you for your time. There you go. He's going to go and pray. And it was quite an important question. Well, I'll be raising that issue in today's Dolan's Dispatch. What about that statistic? 80% of British Jews consider the UK to be a Christian country. 37% of British Muslims have the same view. My thanks to Ajmal Mashroor, and I appreciate him making the time and offering that counter-argument to what Nigel Farage has said, which is that public displays of Muslim prayer should be banned. More to come. This is Talk Breakfast 7:43.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. You are listening to Talk Breakfast. It is 7:45. So much to come, including Dolan's Dispatch at 9 a.m. when I'll be tackling this issue of public Muslim prayer. You may be surprised by what I have to say. Dolan's Dispatch at 9 a.m. Well, there's a surprise, folks. The one in, one out asylum seekers sent to France are coming back to the UK in lorries. Let's get reaction from Tom Jones, who's the deputy online editor at The Critic. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Mark.
Tom, good to have you on the show. You're also a Conservative councillor for Scotton and Lower Wensleydale. What's your reaction to this? Hardly a surprise.
No, it's really not. In fact, I think it's only surprising because it's brought back lorry migration, and I think we all thought that was dead thanks to the small boats.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to roll back the years, really. But it does show a problem with this deal, which is that we are sending back failed asylum seekers back to France. We are taking migrants in return for sending those migrants back, and there is absolutely nothing to stop the migrants that we've sent back coming back again, because, of course, the pull factors that pull migrants to this country have been left completely untouched by Labour.
It's a mockery, isn't it? Meanwhile, there appears to be another U-turn in the offing from the Prime Minister. According to my calculations, U-turn number 19, 19. And this would be the watering down of Shabana Mahmood's proposals to double the length of time in which to qualify for indefinite leave to remain. It seems that may be scrapped altogether. What are the implications for my viewers and listeners and the economy?
Not good, I think, is a slight understatement.
I mean, this all cost us not just tens of billions. You're actually, across the lifetime of someone that's part of the Boris wave, this could be hundreds of billions of pounds, couldn't it? I think what we're looking at here, Tom, Labour are planning to give 1.6 million migrants settled status in the course of this parliament. Well, those are largely going to be low-skilled workers or unemployed, dependent on welfare for the rest of their life.
Yes, that's very true. I actually think it's 1.6 million people who qualify this year. It's actually more than that over the course of this parliament.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. So as
so
an
it
idea
could be
of
what,
the
2 or 3 million?
Yes.
My goodness.
In terms of to give your viewers a sense of the idea of the problem, the 196,000 foreign care workers and their adult dependents who are set to receive ILR will cost the state £10 billion over the course of their lives. That's the 200,000. And, this is multiplied across lots and lots and lots of sectors, because the problem with the Boris wave is that basically it saw a massive lowering of immigration standards. And so Shabana Mahmood has suggested these ILR changes to double the route to settlement from 5 years to 10 years in order basically to address a very specific problematic migration wave that the Conservatives oversaw, frankly. And unfortunately, that has been challenged by Angela Rayner, who sees it as an opportunity to challenge the leadership of Keir Starmer ahead of May's elections, where, of course, Labour are going to do very poorly.
I mean, this was going to be a very welcome, very positive policy from this Labour government. I've always said, Tom, that if the Prime Minister does good things, I will congratulate him. And I will use this platform to say, well done, Prime Minister, that's a great policy. Well, this was a good policy that you would have to wait 10 years to receive indefinite leave to remain. It was a good policy that you couldn't have a criminal record, that you had to speak perfect English, that you had to be a net contributor into the system with a good income and all the rest of it. It was a really great policy, and Labour are going to scrap it.
It's absolutely crazy. It's actually something that that many people on the right were calling for as soon as Boris Johnson resigned. I recall when Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister, people were calling on him to bring in immigration measures that specifically targeted the Boris wave. There was no movement from the Conservatives there. Never did we expect that, Labour would bring in a policy that actually, yes, you're right, I think was broadly what we needed. And it would have addressed the Boris wave. But, it's fine signalling that. But, as we've seen with so many Conservative Home Secretaries, actually getting these policies implemented is, for some reason, much more difficult than it should be.
Tom, for anyone watching on YouTube, you're a fine figure of a man. You're wearing a lovely check shirt and a smart gilet as well. Highly presentable on Talk Breakfast. A lot better than most of my guests. You also look like something of a unit. Do you agree with Kemi Badenoch that the public should intervene on shoplifters? Would you be willing to risk life and limb to stop a jar of Nescafe Gold Blend from being nicked?
No, of course I wouldn't. No. The police, we should be creating a society in which shoplifting is not normalised, because part of the problem here is that if you were to intervene, somebody like me who's 6'5", you're right, I am a bit of a unit, could very easily find themselves on the wrong end of the law. So why would I put myself in harm's way? Not just the physical harm, but the potential legal harm, because God knows the legal system is not on the side of people who stand up for themselves. Why on earth would I put myself in the way of, frankly, protecting Tesco's profits?
Well, let's stay with us on that, because I think it's a really honest answer and I appreciate it, Tom. Let's take a listen to the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, talking about stopping shoplifters.
So if you're in that shop and you see someone doing that, would you intervene?
I think it depends on how big they are.
Good answer. And similarly,
but yes, broadly would be my instincts. I think people should look after their personal safety. I think those people who are stronger should do more. I know that there is now a tendency for people not to put themselves in harm's way, but I also think that sometimes we need to send a message that this is not acceptable. I mean, Lucinda's is a different kind of shop. A lot of the shoplifting we see is of people stealing little bits of pieces from Greg's bakery. Sausage rolls are under lock and key. That's not how things used to be. I think we should be able to say, no, stop that. This is not acceptable.
I've got to say that producer Christian would fight to the death for a Greg's sausage roll, Tom. But the problem with this messaging from Kemi Badenoch is it implies it's our job as citizens to stop crimes like shoplifting from happening. Well, no, we pay our taxes so the police can do that.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, the problem here is that the legal system is simply not processing these people. They're not getting sentences. And so you are seeing shoplifters, even if they are caught, which is incredibly rare now, put straight back on the street with absolutely no consequences for their action. So the state has created a system in which shoplifting is tolerated, allowed, and then is asking us to step in its place. Well, frankly, I think that's incredibly dangerous. People who shoplift, you can't actually guarantee your physical safety because they don't act like the rest of us, because they're shoplifting. So it's an incredibly dangerous thing to ask people to do.
Tom, it's been a delight to have you on the programme. Thank you for your time. Tom Jones is the Deputy Online Editor at The Critic magazine, which is a great read. He's also a Conservative councillor at Scotton and Lower Wensleydale, which is a lovely part of the world. Is Muslim public prayer compatible with British culture? Ben is in Lincolnshire. Good morning, Ben.
Morning, Mark. How you doing?
I'm very well. How are things in Lincolnshire this morning? Have you got a bit of sun going on, cutting through the fog?
I'm working down in Buckinghamshire today, and
nice.
It's thick fog.
Yeah, it is foggy out there. Well, look, you take care. Ben, What do you think about it? What did you think when you saw that footage of 1,000-odd men praying in Trafalgar Square?
I thought this was disgusting and the start of the end of our nation. The Islam, that mosque, that imam that you had on a little while ago stating how tolerant Muslim people are, it's a joke. It's Islam, the actual name Islam itself means to submit. It is not a religion, it's a fascist political ideology. You look up all about fascism and everything about Islam fits the bill. They're pushing the Ummah on the entire planet, the worldwide caliphate. Everywhere that Islam goes, everywhere. Since Muhammad started it all in the 7th century, they followed the same pattern. They move into a country, they get to a certain number, they then start demanding special things with the people, they then try and go political, and then civil war starts. Just all you've got to do is look at Africa. Look at what they're doing in Africa with Boko Haram.
Yeah, it's
all of that.
Quite shocking.
That's going to come to England in the next 50 years. Unless something happens, my grandchildren are going to have to deal with that in this country. I mean, it's disgusting.
And Ben, I mean, I spoke to Trevor Kavanagh about it a couple of weeks ago, and I said, is it a problem if Britain becomes a majority Muslim country? And he said, yes, it is a problem. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
But is the genie out of the lamp, Ben? Is the genie out of the lamp? Is it now just inevitable that this religious faith is going to dominate our lives?
it's going to come to that point. The left, the liberal left, seem to think that they can control the genie, and they're opening Pandora's box, and they haven't got a clue what they're doing, because they seem to think, oh, well, it's all fine, it's all wonderful, all our Muslim friends. The vast majority of British Muslims are... I'm an atheist. I don't believe in religion one little bit, but my children celebrate Christmas. Next couple of weeks, I've got my grandchildren up for Easter. We've done an Easter egg hunt in the garden. It's how the British people are, and I know an awful lot of Muslim people that treat Islam in exactly the same way that the average British person treats Christianity. But these people are terrified of speaking out against the rest of Islam, because they'll be shunned by their community, they'll become pariahs, in some cases they'll be murdered, like that our press, for some strange reason, calls it an honour killing. I mean, there's nothing honourable about killing somebody because they happen to have a different value or belief or fall in love with somebody else different. It's just, there's nobody else does this. I work with loads of Hindus, I work with loads of Sikhs, I work with loads of people, Africans, the whole lot. It's construction industry. And
it's a different ball game. Ben, please call me again soon. You made some great points. More to come. This is Talk Breakfast.
Current affairs, international news, letting criminals off while sending... Oi! Oi! You shut up! I'm trying to record something.
Stand by for 3 powerhouse hours of breaking news, challenging views. I don't give a flying damn about international law. I think people will viscerally reject this.
Hello from Crowborough, where the local residents are enraged with what has happened to their community merely overnight, when just 27 single male asylum seeker illegal migrants were bussed into their military training camp. Behind me are local residents, people from all over the country. Shabana Mahmood has said that this is an effective way of getting rid of those expensive, flashy asylum hotels. But unfortunately, these people are still placed within the community.
Whole town is very afraid because these are unvetted men from countries that are you know, the government warn us not to go to. I've got an 18-year-old daughter, and she gets the bus opposite camp.
Do you feel safe for her?
No, so that will have to stop.
Right.
We'll either have to wait with her or take her to wherever she needs to go.
The reason I'm here today is because I live in Crowborough and my family, I've got a wife and children, and just worried about, you know, my wife walking to work and my sons, you know, walking about. Anything can happen. Kind of that nowadays and age, all what's going on, what's happening in this country. So I'm just concerned and frightened, you know.
There was support from other towns, other communities, because of course Shabana Mahmood has threatened other communities, and she said they're going to open site after site after site. Well, I would hope that if she's going to try and do that, she learns some lessons about the way she's done it in Crowborough, because this is not finished. We are not finished objecting to this plan.
Crowborough says no! Crowborough says no! Crowborough says no!
We would urge her to reconsider, and whatever she does, she needs to talk to the people that she's imposing these things on.
If you had a direct line to Keir Starmer and Shabana Mahmood, what would you say to them?
Look after your most vulnerable first. It's your priority to look after your vulnerable.
If they're bringing illegal immigrants into a camp in the dead of night, why are they doing that? They're doing that because it's disingenuous, it's dishonest, it's covert, and they're trying to keep the reality away from the local community of what they're actually doing to us. We've now got to the end of the entrance to the camp, we've got cameras, we've got police drones. It's like a cloud that's come over this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Three minutes past 8. Happy Friday, one and all. Mark Dolan with you. Talk Breakfast. Lovely to have your company. A very big couple of hours to come. It is Mark Dolan back Friday, Saturday and Sunday. I've missed you hugely. Very excited, by the way, about Sunday's show. At 9:30 a.m, a Talk Breakfast exclusive. Tom Bower, the author of a devastating new book about Harry and Meghan, live on the show Sunday at 7:30. But we've got lots to get through today. Breaking this morning, Nigel Farage steps into the Muslim public prayer row, saying such displays of dominance are unacceptable and should be banned. Is he right? Meanwhile, U-turn number 19 from this government, according to our calculations, as the Prime Minister is expected to scrap plans to toughen immigration rules around indefinite leave to remain. But will granting citizenship to the Boris wave of immigrants cost the taxpayer tens of billions of pounds? And if so, did you vote for that? And Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, says the public should intervene to stop shoplifters. Is that our job? Would you risk life and limb to save a jar of Nescafe Gold Blend from being nicked? Let me know your thoughts. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Tommy's on the phones today. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. We know you're busy, so leave a voice note. We'll put it on air. You can hear the show on DAB+, in-app and online, thanks to our lead engineer, Sam, and our executive producer, the most experienced producer in commercial speech radio, Christian Mitchell, directing our TV output, Neha. If you want to see the show, just head to YouTube, search Talking Up We Pop, and as the saying goes, let's talk. So what about these shoplifters? Would you intervene? Is that our job? Here's a voice note from Paul.
Morning, Mark. It's Paul from Birmingham. Regarding shoplifters, I think most of us would have a go. We just would. It's in our nature, maybe. But it's the fact that you'll get arrested for it and maybe taken to court and maybe do some time for it. I didn't get sued by the shoplifter. That's the problem, Mark.
Paul, you're so right. It's the same thought, actually, when you sign up to be a police officer. Will you get prosecuted for being a policeman or policewoman? Similarly, the military, right? You are serving this country abroad, overseas. 30 years later, when you're trying to enjoy your retirement, someone like Keir Starmer comes in and decides it's OK for you to be sued. And I totally understand people's hesitation, therefore. Well, look, let's get reaction to the big stories of the day. Are public Muslim prayers incompatible with British culture? Who better to ask than broadcaster, former Home Office Minister and practising Christian Anne Widdecombe. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning to you.
Anne, you are a woman of not just political conviction, but deep religious faith. What did you make of those scenes in Trafalgar Square of over 1,000 mainly Muslim men praying to Allah?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't want to put a blanket ban on public prayers. If, for example, it was a Christian rally in Trafalgar Square, I wouldn't have had a problem at all. But, of course, we do have here a background. The group that put this on apparently is the same very group that Keir Starmer pulled out of the event because at that stage he was worried about anti-Semitism. Now, of course, in the wake of Gorton and Manchester, he's worried about the Muslim vote, so he's taking a different line. And I think it is a question of just deciding on a case-by-case basis whether something is acceptable or not.
Now, we know that the Prime Minister addressed British Muslims a couple of years ago before the election, Anne, in the run-up to Remembrance Weekend. I don't know if you remember this, but I featured it in one of my Dolan's Dispatch monologues. And the Prime Minister had been wearing a poppy all day and neglected to wear that poppy whilst recording a video for British Muslims. The Prime Minister just 2 weeks ago addressed British Muslims at Westminster Hall in Parliament, very keen to stress that Britain did not participate in the action against Iran in the Middle East. And now Kemi Badenoch has accused the Prime Minister of sucking up to British Muslims by seeking the sacking of Nick Timothy. Do you think she's right? Has Starmer pandered to British Muslims?
Oh, I think they've been the Labour Party have been very, very frightened by the Gorton and Manchester result. I think they want now to undermine the position of the Greens with Muslims because the Greens homed in on Muslims during that campaign, and the various leaflets and the and campaigning outside mosques, etc. It was very clear that that was where they were pitching their appeal, and I think the Prime Minister is frightened by that. And is now indeed trying to portray the Labour Party as the party of the Muslim vote. But of course, you know, Muslims should be like everybody else in the population. You know, some Christians vote Labour and some Conservative and some, heaven help them, probably even vote Green. And exactly the same should apply to all faiths. So, you know, it shouldn't be a matter of politics.
And is Islam a takeover religion?
I think the answer to that has got to be, if you look at it in general, yes. It feels very strongly, it proselytises and it doesn't tolerate dissent. So from that point of view, yes. But equally, you and I, and I'm sure you do, I certainly do, know lots and lots of Muslim families who don't have that sort of view at
I've got thousands of British Muslims who work hard, who start businesses, are friends, neighbours and lovers, watching and listening to this show as we speak.
Yes, I mean, that is absolutely so. And we shouldn't forget, you know, the contribution that they've made to British society. I mean, a lot of them came over here with the express intention of doing better for their children than they could do in their home country. And they produced doctors and lawyers and accountants and goodness knows what else, because they've insisted on attention to education at home. And they've made a huge contribution to Britain. And they are not of the takeover mentality at all. They blend in. And, you know, they not only do they blend in, but they'll actually help.
And, of course, many feature in the front line of British politics, including within Reform UK and the London mayoral candidate for Reform UK, Leila Cunningham, and the effective shadow Home Secretary, Zia Youssef, who no doubt you know well.
Indeed, we do have Muslims in Reform, and we should have. They should be in all political parties.
A couple of Muslims might vote Reform even.
I don't think it'll be just a couple, quite honestly. I think it'll be quite a lot. You know, they have a view as to how they want to see the country develop. But as I said, and to go back to your original question, Is it a takeover religion? In its fundamentalist form, it certainly is.
Should moderate Muslims, therefore, do more to call it out?
I suspect they do an awful lot behind the scenes. But whether they could be doing more, I don't know.
Well, I took a voice note from Ben. Anne, sorry to interrupt you. I took a voice note from Ben earlier, and he said that the moderate Muslims are afraid to stand up to the extremists because they fear they'll be castigated, ostracised, or even harmed.
Well, that might happen if they're taking on the very fundamentalist sections, yes. But they could make noises in general, and probably should make noises in general. And I would like to hear a lot more from the Muslim Council. I would like to hear, well, do they approve of this and do they approve of that? And I would like to hear a lot more from them in the same way that we hear from Christians and from the British Board of Deputies, Jewish. We hear from them. Why don't we hear some very clear statements from the Muslim Council?
Well, you're so right about that. Anne, as you join us, we have breaking news. Government borrowing has jumped unexpectedly last month to the second highest February level since records began. Public sector borrowing stood at £14.3 billion in February, £2.2 billion higher than a year ago. And this on top of 0% growth in January of this year. We're in trouble, aren't we?
Yes, we're in trouble. We've been in trouble for some time. We spent as if there was no tomorrow during COVID. And to be perfectly fair, this government inherited that. But then it's added to it in its own way with the welfare bill and other expenditures to such an extent that it can't actually spend where it matters, which is on the nation's defence.
Yes. It's a deep concern. The Chancellor will try to blame the war in Iran. Well, that's not credible, is it?
Well, not when you're looking back over a year. I mean, yes, it is perfectly credible to say that the war in Iran is now putting enormous strains on public finances, particularly with the energy costs that are flowing from what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. It's perfectly fair to say that. But it isn't fair to say that that is the root cause, because if you'd stopped a few weeks ago, before the war in Iran started, you would still have got a huge rise in borrowing.
Now, Anne, you don't take any prisoners, do you, intellectually or perhaps even physically? Do you agree with the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, that the public should intervene to stop shoplifters? Would you risk life and limb to save a jar of Nescafe Gold Blend from being stolen?
Well, I don't know that I would wish to be shot or stabbed in the interest of a jar of Nescafe, but yes, in general, I think the proposition that you should at least consider having a go is valid, and it used to be taken for granted. What shoplifters rely on is that nobody will stop them. They're quite blatant. They walk out sometimes, with huge carrier bags of goods that they've just filched from the shelves. Well, of course, people should intervene to stop them, but always do it on a case-by-case basis. If somebody's brandishing a gun or a knife, no, you don't intervene.
Well, this from Suze, Anne, who's messaged in. Mark, your last guest, Tom Jones, what a wuss. I'm a 71-year-old granny and I call out shoplifters whenever I see them. I also tell people to get their feet off the chairs on trains. If we don't call it out, it will get worse. Of course, I get verbally abused because society is breaking down and shoplifting is a sign of decline. Well, it does beg the question, whose job is it? Is it the authorities and the police? Is it their job to get us to behave better, or is it ours?
Oh, it's everybody's job. There is no one person in isolation, whether it's a policeman or a store detective or a member of the public who sees what's happening. There's no one person in isolation who has that responsibility. We've all got that responsibility, and we should all be alert, and we should always call it out. I mean, that lady is quite right. How often do we look at people with their feet on the seats in trains and think, oh, but we don't actually say anything?
Well, Anne, I mean, I think, it's very interesting to have you on to discuss this because you're a former Home Office minister. And actually, I think the sort of legal infrastructure has changed a lot since you were in post, because lots of my viewers and listeners would love to tackle a shoplifter, but they're worried that in doing so, they'll be the ones getting in trouble. They will have their collar felt.
Yeah. I mean, the fact is that the police work to targets, they work to statistics, they work to box ticking. And it's a very easy box to tick if an ordinary citizen has tackled somebody and that person then says they suffered harm. It's a very easy box to tick. And that is why, for example, when you get antisocial behaviour and a householder goes out to confront the people and the vandals, the police will sometimes arrest him rather than the vandals. And that is just fairly typical of a target society. I've always said one of the biggest contributions you could make to functioning in society is to get rid of most of the targets that we've got and get people exercising their own judgment.
Well, that would be an ideal scenario, wouldn't it? And I should stress, as we're a commercial organisation policed by Ofcom, that other brands are available. Nescafe Gold Blend, of course, is a favourite of mine, Sam. But, I mean, what's your preferred brand of choice? Are you a Lavazza lady, Kenco, or Waitrose own brand?
No, Nescafe.
There you go. Anne's old school. And what do you make, by the way, of Nick Timothy? Because, look, you are a former Conservative of many decades. You're a legend of the party, even though you've moved on. And you've got still friends who are part of that party, that organisation. What do you make of Nick Timothy's intervention? Because I think he's been incredibly courageous. This is the Shadow Justice spokesman who has called out this public Muslim prayer, saying it's not appropriate. He's suffered death threats. But what do you make of his intervention? Do you think he deserves credit?
I think he deserves credit for speaking out, yes. And as I say, you must do this on a case-by-case basis. And you must judge not only by the event, but who the organisers are and what it is likely to be about. But as I said right at the beginning, you know, I wouldn't ban a Christian prayer rally in Trafalgar Square. And so I would be chary of banning others unless there was good reason. And I think that is the overriding consideration. Is there good reason to ban a particular group?
And briefly, was what we saw in Trafalgar Square more than an act of faith? Was a message being sent? Was this a flex?
I'm not sure.
Come on, Anne.
Let me finish. I'm not sure. I mean, yes.
Do me a favour.
No, look, stop telling me what answer I should give. Otherwise, don't bother asking the question that you can give the answer. Now,
I want a bit of common sense. I thought that's what we were going to get when I saw your name on the running order, Anne.
We're about to get some common sense if you shut up and listen, quite honestly. As I said, you know, I'm not sure. Yes, it was a demonstration of a particular group and its power and its faith. Yes, it was that. But at the same time, they were all praying. And it is quite difficult to say if somebody is praying that they're flexing.
Were they praying, or was it activism? Was it politics? And did that footage make you feel uncomfortable? Because it made me feel uncomfortable.
It made me feel slightly uncomfortable. Yes, it did. But as I've said before, and I hate repeating myself, it is a question of who is the group, what are their aims, what is their record. That determines whether this is a flex or simply a prayer gathering.
And it's always the deepest privilege and pleasure to have you on the show. Really enjoyed our conversation this morning. The fearless and robust Anne Widdecombe, offering a very balanced and nuanced answer in relation to this issue of Muslim public prayer. Anne's a very wise person. She's politically experienced and she's a practicing Christian as well. And she's found a bit of middle ground, possibly a little distance from the leader of the party that she supports, Reform UK, who would like to unilaterally ban this kind of example of public prayer. Let me know your thoughts, 03444991000. Here is a voice note from Big Alan.
Good morning, Mark. Big Al from Swansea, yeah? Listen, buddy, all you got to do for the next general election is people get off their asses and go and vote. What was the turnout last time? About 40 or 50% people can't be bothered. So long as the majority of normal British people, indigenous, get out and vote for the right party, not the way we got now with the Uni Party, because you had 30 years of catastrophic immigration. Long as you go and vote, and we'll have a 5, 6, 10 years of a reset, and our country will be back. It's as simple as that. People panicking, oh, our country's losing identity. Well, go and vote and sort it out. It's as simple as that. And stop all this doom and gloom. Just fix it, for goodness sakes. Keep up the great show, buddy. Ta-ra.
Thank you, Alan, for your cheery and trenchant voice note. Keep them coming. Next up, Sir Keir Starmer's 19th U-turn, and it could cost you billions. Don't go anywhere.
Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is public Muslim prayer compatible with British culture? This is a voice note from Steve.
Steve from Manchester. I'm just listening to that imam telling you about the prayers at Trafalgar Square. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm an atheist, so I don't really care less about religion. But we don't want to see prayer of any form in public spaces. Islam, Catholicism, Buddhism, Judaism. We do not want to see mass prayers in public spaces. You have buildings that are specifically designed for doing that sort of thing. Churches, mosques, synagogues, places like that. Religion is a very, very controversial thing. You cannot force it on other people. And doing it in public spaces is forcing it on other people. It shouldn't be allowed.
Thank you for a brilliant voice note, Steve. Keep them coming. The messages are coming in thick and fast. This from Tom, who's a happy Villa fan, doing a bit better than Spurs this season. And Tom says, good morning, Mark. Fill Trafalgar Square with Christians praying this weekend, and let's see what happens. You raise a good point. What about Jews? If Jews dared to pray in Trafalgar Square, they would need an army of security, wouldn't they? They would need a ring of steel. Good morning, Mark, says Peter. Are there any churches in Saudi Arabia? And Mike says, Mark, I wonder what the imam guest that you had on and his followers' reaction would have been if Trafalgar Square had been full of Jewish people praying in public. Mike, thank you for that. I'll get to more of your feedback very shortly because the messages are brilliant. But we do have a developing story, breaking news at 8:25 on Talk Breakfast. Government borrowing jumped unexpectedly last month to the second highest February figures since records began. Public sector borrowing stood at £14.3 billion in February, £2.2 billion higher than a year ago. Let's get reaction from a good friend of the show, investigations campaigner at the Taxpayers Alliance, Callum McGoldrick. Good morning, Callum.
Hi, good morning, Mark. Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, Callum, I would suggest it's great to have you, that the headline from this story is that Britain lives beyond its means, and the Chancellor didn't get the memo.
You're absolutely correct. We see every year that the government likes to increase borrowing costs rather than reducing spending. Labour have also gone after tax rises, which are sort of a more immediate sting for taxpayers. But the cost of borrowing keeps on going up because the government keeps on borrowing more money.
Most definitely. Does this increase tell us that things are going in the wrong direction?
It tells us that Labour are absolutely, completely unable to get spending under control. It shows that they keep on trying to make big promises to the left of their party while also trying to keep the middle ground happy by not increasing taxes by as much as they need to promise or to fill all of the funding that they have to. We have a national debt that stands at about £2.5 trillion, and there's absolutely no way that that will be paid down under this government.
It most definitely won't be. It's been revealed today, another big story that's doing the rounds, Callum, is that the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has spent £6 billion of our money on green schemes overseas. And we've calculated that £6 billion, if it was spent here, would deliver 10 hospitals and just under 200,000 police officers.
Well, it's something that we see that the foreign aid budget often doesn't particularly align with the interests of British taxpayers. I think this is an example of where the Foreign Office is trying to fill all of these sorts of nice-sounding, cushy ideas for foreign policy spending, sort of things like green ideas in third world countries. But when we look at what that money could be spent on here, is, well, as you say, it's more hospitals, it's more police officers, it's more things that British taxpayers actually want.
Yeah, most definitely. Do you think that this borrowing is going to continue? I mean, is there any sense on the part of this government that it's going to get worse before it gets better? Will there be green shoots? Will Rachel Reeves eventually be vindicated?
Well, we saw Labour were quite triumphalist about the very dire minimal growth that they saw in the first year. But of course, this was all fueled by massive public sector pay rises funded by the private sector and more borrowing. As the time goes on in office, I think it's far more likely that we'll see borrowing costs go up, taxes go up, and sort of the national debt continue to rise as well.
Now, the Chancellor is going to try to blame the war in Iran for stubborn inflation and low growth. Is that a reasonable defence?
Well, we've already seen that they're completely unable to control spending. I think just because there's a war in Iran, it doesn't sort of explain why they've been so bad on this issue for the past 2 years as well. I think it's a fortunate timing cop-out for them, but I think as it will be reflected in their entire time in office, it's not the sole reason that they're experiencing such high costs now.
Well, let's take a listen, if we can, Callum, to an intervention from a former colleague of yours, Lord Matthew Elliott, who co-founded the Taxpayers Alliance. Take a listen.
According to Table 5 of the appendix to the OBR's report, the Treasury will collect £331 billion in income tax in the current financial year. But according to Table 4.6, we will spend £333 billion on welfare, a sum which is almost as big as the combined GDP of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. In other words, we are now spending more to facilitate people not working through raising income tax from people working.
Well, the calibration of the economy's wrong, isn't it? And the incentives are perverse. It pays not to work, Callum, and a brief glance at the history books will tell you that doesn't end well.
Well, not at all, because you're putting all of the burden onto the productive side of the economy without any sort of incentive for people that are in the unproductive side to move over. I think what we've seen with Labour is that, as you said earlier, they've had 19 U-turns. So one of the biggest ones was on that welfare spending reduction. They promised a very, very measly 5 billion cuts out of a 300 billion bill. By the time it got through their own backbenchers, it ended up costing taxpayers even more money.
Most definitely. Let me give you a brief anecdote. I mean, I've got two anecdotes for you, actually. First of all, a friend of mine is a stand-up comedian, Callum, and he works hard. He goes around the country here and there, and he'll do the odd well-paid gig and then the odd not-so-well-paid gig. I think he's just nudged into the 40k, the upper tax bracket, and he's been offered a gig for 80 quid, which he'd like to do because money's money. And I think you'll agree, 80 quid is nothing to be sniffed at, except that by the time he's paid his VAT on that and his income tax, he's left with £27, at which point he's thinking, well, it's not worth it. I'll stay at home. I'll just skip that visit to a restaurant. And that's the problem with high taxes.
Well, exactly. And we're going to see it. I think stand-up comedians might be hit quite hard by this, given the amount of travelling they do. But fuel duty will be going up too, meaning that British people
Oh, it's a good point. I hadn't included his petrol. Yeah. So he might be left with a tenner from a fee of £80.
Well, exactly. And when people look at that, it's just not worth them doing it. And Labour tried to say that, people's decisions are not impacted by tax policy. Ed Miliband has famously done this, but it's obviously true that they do. When you look at how much tax receipts are coming in, it's like, well, it reduces when they put taxes up to such an incredibly high amount.
Yes, briefly, Callum, as the other personal story is just that I upgraded my phone contract the other day, SIM-only job, as you do, and it was EE, other networks are available, Vodafone, you name it, O2. But I spoke to this lady, and she was in Glasgow, call centre, not on big money, Callum, I think it's fair to say. And she was complaining about how taxes are going up and nothing's improving. It's the first time I've heard somebody on a modest income complaining about tax. And that is the new conversation, isn't it? Normally, it's the aspiring middle classes who complain about tax. Now it's everyone.
Well, because it's what we're seeing. We're seeing prices go up across the board on everything, and this is in large part as a result of tax policy. Fuel duty is one that will be a big kick in the teeth to many when they just want to take their kids to school or drive to work. So it's going to become a lot more expensive to do that, and everyone feels that. It's not just people in middle or higher income earners.
Callum, I thought it would be a pleasure to have you, and it was. Thanks for your wise counsel on this issue. Callum McGoldrick is the investigations campaign manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, responding to the breaking news that government borrowing jumped unexpectedly last month to the second highest level on a February since records began. So much for fixing the foundations, so much for stabilising the economy, so much for the grown-ups in charge. How's that working for you? 8:33, this is Talk Breakfast. Here's a voice note from Mike on public Muslim prayer.
Morning, Mark. It's Mike from Lancashire. Regarding that mass Muslim prayer, of course it was provocative. It was done in front of our greatest naval hero. They want to go and pray, let them go and pray in the mosque with their hero, but not a British hero. Definitely provocative. Should be stopped.
Did thousands of people needlessly die as a result of lockdowns? That's next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is public Muslim prayer incompatible with British culture? Michael says, Mark, last week 2 police officers in Sutton High Street commanded a lone Christian preacher to stop reading from the Bible, whilst the chiefs and politicians allowed mass Islamic prayers in Trafalgar Square. Two-tier society and the Brits are last. Nikki in Huntingdon says, good morning, Mark. What a treat waking up to you today. Thank you for having the backs of us alarm clock Brits listening at work. Have a magnificent Friday. You too, Nikki. Thank you for the kind words. I spoke to an imam earlier. And Kev says, good morning, Mark. Mr. Masroor, your guest, had to go when the heavy questions started to come in. Oh dear, great timing. Kev, thank you for that. Christine says the question to your Muslim guest should be, would we be able to do mass prayer in your country? We never get an answer. Christine, we know what the answer would be. And should we be stopping shoplifters? Would you risk life and limb to stop a jar of Nescafe Gold Blend from being nicked? Dave in Tenbury Wells said, good morning, Mark. Shoplifters, no need for a single person to tackle them. Everyone should point at them, shout thief, and photograph them. I bet they wouldn't be back after that. Thank you very much for that. Well, a government inquiry into the COVID response suggests that the stay-at-home slogan in regard to saving the NHS may have cost more lives than it was attempting to save. Let's get reaction now from 2 good friends of mine, 2 voices of reason throughout the madness of COVID. Professor David Payton, who is the Professor of Industrial Economics at Nottingham University's Business School, and Gary Sidley, retired NHS consultant clinical psychologist. David, let me start with you. Great to see you again. It's like the good old days having you back on the radio.
Morning, Mark. It's great to be with you again.
Listen, you were an important voice during COVID, with the reason being that you're not a man that lacks empathy. You're not someone that denied it was a pandemic. You're not someone that denied that COVID was a very nasty virus that killed too many people. But you crunched the numbers, didn't you? And you felt that this COVID response was going to do more harm than good.
Yeah, that's right. And the issue was, many parts to the problem, but one of them was whether the measures that the government were implementing to restrict COVID were actually having a beneficial effect, but also what the costs of them were. And actually, they didn't stack up on either side. So we've now got some quite good empirical evidence published in peer-reviewed papers suggesting that lockdowns, for example, had a very tiny, if any, effect on even on COVID deaths. But when you look at the whole picture, when you look at the deaths they may have caused, such as this report yesterday revealed in terms of people delaying treatment for heart problems, for cancer and so on, the net effect of lockdowns was, if anything, to increase overall deaths. So what they use this measure of excess deaths, how many deaths might you expect and how many deaths did we observe? And the evidence suggests that lockdowns certainly didn't reduce excess deaths and probably increase them. So I'm not surprised that the report yesterday is suggesting that that message had these impacts and may have caused thousands of deaths. It's one of the few sort of sensible things that have come out of the COVID inquiry. I've been rather critical of the approach they've taken, but it was interesting to see that they did make that admission yesterday.
And David, the likes of yourself and other senior medics, scientists, academics called out their concerns about the COVID response and were demonised. Some people lost their jobs, others lost their reputations. A price was paid by a lot of people who look to have been proved right.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it's one of the worst things of the COVID. It was something new was going on. So you can understand there's lots of uncertainty and people weren't sure what to do. But I think what we really missed was a frank and honest debate. And when you shut down voices on one side of that debate, it's not usually a good outcome for policy. And I think we're seeing that now when we look back. There's now in the academic literature at least a much better debate and an acknowledgement. So we've got the work of Professor Simon Wood, who's showed pretty convincingly that COVID infections were going down before each and every lockdown that we had in England.
Amazing.
And that's very reputable research. But you're right, at the time, people who raised concerns about the measures like vaccine mandates, mask mandates, lockdowns and so on were demonised. I got contacted by quite a few people. My university were okay. They let me speak as I saw fit, but I heard from many people who were essentially shut down, in one case actually disciplined for speaking out, in another case told that they were unlikely to get promoted if they carried on speaking out. So I think it's a really important lesson. Whatever the issue is, it's important not to shut down debate. Free speech is really crucial, even when it looks like it's a crisis, and people can always find a reason to shut down free speech. Actually, we're better off allowing all voices to have a say, and let's not hide dissenting views.
Most definitely. Well, I'm sure, David, that you were called a granny killer in hushed tones. It's my view that the lockdowns did Granny no favours at all. Dr. Gary Sidley is a retired NHS consultant clinical psychologist. Now, we know that these policies came as a result of the advice of SAGE, Gary, and therefore, this was driven by government. It was policy. But do you think the NHS itself, as an institution, has a case to answer for its response to COVID?
I think so, yeah. I think the government directives were very unhelpful, and of course the fear mongering at the time was excessive. People were frightened, staff were frightened, so a lot of knee-jerk reactions, I think, and clearly shutting down hospitals for non-COVID patients, discouraging patients not to attend. The stats show that had consequences with regards to cardiac arrests not being treated, cancers not being detected early enough. The info on that is quite robust.
It's devastating, really, Gary, isn't it? Because, and I'm afraid to say that I did, broadcast from this very studio during the pandemic, and I remember saying that, COVID's a nasty virus, but it's predominantly mild for most of the population. It targets those with comorbidities and the elderly. And yet there were younger people with serious conditions like cancer who were not treated. So we got it the wrong way round in too many cases, didn't we?
Yeah, that's right. People with non-respiratory problems were neglected, either due to the fact that they didn't seek help because of the scaremongering and shaming as well, of course, because if you attended hospital at that time, you were kind of taking resources from people who are in greater need, and putting extra pressure on our hospitals. And yet this idea that the hospitals were overpopulated at that time, that's been questionable.
Many of those wards were empty, Gary. Let's just let's call it out.
I was just going to say, Mark, it was Professor Woolhouse at the Scottish COVID inquiry. I think it was in October last year. And his quote was that the bed occupancy was at an all-time record low in his estimation at the time. So I think we can really call out some of the underlying assumptions of the dominant COVID narrative, really.
Most definitely. I mean, there are so many stories, Gary. I mean, I remember taking a call from a woman who'd gone to the GP surgery with a very sick child, a crazy temperature, could have been sepsis, who knows what was going on. And the actual entrance to the GP surgery was padlocked shut. And she was told to go to A&E, and they wouldn't take her. So it's pretty mad. Gary, briefly, you're part of Smile Free, which is an organisation that's very concerned about masking policies. Now, of course, we're very aware of this very concerning outbreak of meningitis in certain locations across the country. Do you think that bringing back masking is going to help stop the spread?
In a word, no. But I think the evidence for masks being an effective barrier to pathogens is pretty limited, particularly when you look at real-world settings. It might be in a laboratory, or everybody wore them perfectly every day. But in the real world, which is the world we all live in, all the real-world evidence through the COVID event really concluded that they were ineffectual. That's before we start talking about the harms as well.
Gary, do you worry that whenever there's any kind of health outbreak, masking seems now to be the default? Is that a concern?
It is a huge concern, Mark. In fact, I published an article just the other day called it Operation Muzzle. Basically, there's a strategic plan at the moment by members of the pandemic industry, let's say, to actually make respirators. That's the N95 masks, the white pointy ones, to make them the basic unit of protection for all healthcare staff all of the time. They've written to the World Health Organization with that demand to mandate respirators as the basic health protection bits of the uniform. So even outside of so-called pandemics, all our staff in hospitals, if they had their way, would be wearing these
Gary,
things.
you have concerns. In this very studio, I chopped up a mask. It led to a global news story and a viral video watched by in excess of 10 million people. Was my decision to cut up a mask on Talk Radio at the time, now Talk, was that dangerous and irresponsible?
I would call it that. I remember it well, and I appreciate the act at the time, not least because it got lots of attention. And obviously, those of us on this side of the argument, the more sceptical side of the argument, struggled to get publicity, and that certainly attracted publicity, Mark.
Well, whether I was right or wrong, it's important to debate these things. As David said earlier, you know, if you're going to follow the science, let's debate the science. Lads, what a treat to have you back on the show. We should get you to talk about other stuff because, of course, you must be so sick of hearing about COVID. But really enjoyed your company and thanks for your wise words in the course of the pandemic. I think it's all aged very well. Professor David Payton and Dr. Gary Sidley. Now, let's be clear that the government are absolutely crystal clear that the lockdowns, the masking, the vaccine rollouts were all significant in preserving NHS capacity and in saving lives. They're very clear that the masking, the vaccine and the lockdowns were critically important to save lives. It's all about debate, isn't it? It's all about opinions. What's yours? Here's a voice note from Sean. Should shoplifters be stopped by the public? Take a listen to this.
Morning, Mark. Sean from Grimsby. A couple of months ago, I was in the queue at Heaven and a known shoplifter was in front of me and he tried nicking a box of wash beads. And I said to him, don't even think about nicking that, mate. And he goes, but I'm starving. I said, you can't eat wash beads. I literally dragged him and threw him out on the front. And then at the same time, another large gentleman who was next to me said, do you know what? I work all week. I've had enough of this SHIT, and then give him a good clout round the head. And it was quite frankly deserved as well, mate. Great show.
Well, listen, you're a bit of a rock star. I would love you to have my back. I would go into battle with you, Sean. And what I will say, very importantly, is we do not condone violence under any circumstances whatsoever. But what we do condone is courage and moral backbone. And Sean, you've got that in spades. This is Talk Breakfast. So much more to get through. 8:49. A simple question, you know, is religious prayer, especially religious public prayer, is it compatible with British culture and society? I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Plus, we're going to get more on this meningitis outbreak. How serious could it be? Is it coming to a town near you? It's all about your opinions. Don't forget, Dolan's Dispatch is on the way at 9 a.m. It might get me cancelled this morning. Good. Don't go anywhere.
every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, have taken that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Amid all of this public debate about Muslim prayer in Trafalgar Square, a lovely healing message from Betty, who says, "Good morning, Mark. Happy Eid Mubarak to all of our moderate neighbours." I'll be tackling that issue in a special Dolan's Dispatch in 5 minutes' time. But we are very concerned, are we not, about this outbreak of meningitis. It's an incredibly serious illness, and a vaccination programme has been expanded following a deadly outbreak in Kent, with university students queuing for hours for jabs. Cases now stand at 27. Now, let's just find out more about this disease, how serious it is, and whether the spread could worsen. I'm delighted to welcome the Chief Executive of Meningitis Now, Tom Nutt. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning.
Tom, can you just, for those that aren't aware, the nature of this illness, what it is and how serious it can be?
Well, meningitis is a disease. It's, in fact, the inflammation of the so-called meninges, which is the membrane that protects the brain and the spinal cord. It's, as I say, a very serious disease. Around about 1 in 10 people who are affected by bacterial meningitis, which is what we're talking about in Kent, may die. And tragically, people can die in 24 hours or less. So it is a very serious illness, as you say, Mark.
And tragically, 2 young people, I understand university students, undergraduates, have succumbed to this disease. So, you know, this is different to the conversation around COVID with older people, comorbidities. This can take down a perfectly healthy person.
Absolutely. I think one of them is actually a sixth form student, Mark.
Oh, really?
So,
oh, my goodness.
Indeed.
Tragic.
But it is worth all your viewers knowing that meningitis can affect anyone at any age. As it happens, this teenage and young adult age group is the second most at risk group for this kind of meningitis.
So what about the vaccination? Clearly, it's a really good idea, but will it work? Will it in this sort of time frame save lives, do you think?
Well, I think the measures that have been put in place by the public health officials, the UK Health Security Agency, are the right ones, and they've clearly kept them under review over the course of the week. So the contact tracing, the prophylactic antibiotics, and now these vaccines will help to keep those people in the Canterbury community and connected to that. Hopefully, it will keep them safe. The antibiotics will help to destroy the bacteria that causes the disease. And in the longer run, those targeted vaccinations will help to give protection to those people.
Tom, if you had more influence, in government, or maybe you were the chief executive of the NHS rather than Meningitis Now, what would you do going forward by way of health policy to tackle this awful disease?
Well, vaccinations do what they say on the tin. They protect healthy people from disease. So if we had that, well, if I was chief executive of the NHS, then probably what I would be doing would be looking to roll out this MenB vaccination to teenagers and young adults across the UK. We're talking about a very severe outbreak in Kent. It's rightly caught the headlines. But of course, here at Meningitis Now, we see meningitis day in, day out. It is relatively rare, so none of your viewers need to be panicking, but they do need to be aware about the risks and the signs and symptoms. And yes, as I say, vaccines do protect otherwise healthy people from ill health, and thereby preventing the devastation that we've seen in Kent this week.
Well, your charity is a great cause. If you'd like to donate to Meningitis Now, just go to meningitisnow.org, a worthy organisation. Tom, thank you for your valuable time. We appreciate it. Tom Nutt is the chief executive of that charity. By the way, quick one, shout out to Paul in Christchurch. Paul, you're a lovely man. He's a big fan of Talk and a big fan of Alarm Clock Britain. Well, we're a fan of yours, Paul. Thank you for that. Thank you to the gazillion people that stop me in the street to say they love the network. Our job is simple. We just say what we think is important. We try to reflect your concerns, and we don't have an agenda. We'll get it right, we'll get it wrong, but we'll always be honest, we'll always be authentic. That's all we can do. And it's all about your feedback as well. Lots more to come. Dolan's Dispatch in 5 minutes' time might get me cancelled. First, let's have some sport.
90 minutes in 90 seconds from The Sun.
And I'm delighted to welcome Martin Lipton, Chief Sports Reporter at The Sun. Hello, Martin.
Good morning.
Let's try not to talk about Spurs. What happened at Newcastle?
Well, it was an utter disaster in Catalonia and Barcelona. They lost 7-2 on the night. And surprise, surprise, some of the players don't want to be there anymore. They went to Newcastle because of the money. They went to Newcastle because of the promise of the club being on the up. They went to Newcastle with the expectation of Champions League football. They won the League Cup last year. They're in Champions League this year, but they won't be in it next year. And quite a lot of them suddenly are eyeing the exit door.
I know, my heart breaks for the Geordies. I love Newcastle. What's happening at Chelsea, by the way? A little bit of drama behind the scenes.
Yeah, there's a big issue about the team for the PSG games being leaked in the French media. There was a proper old-fashioned mole hunt. Lots of fingers being pointed, lots of questions. Who could have given the team away? Were they deliberately undermining Chelsea? Have they got it in for Liam Vosenia? Well, Vosenia says they've identified the mole, claims it was an accident. No one meant to do it. I'm not sure the Chelsea fans will buy that. There's a growing sense of discontent at Stamford Bridge. The fans aren't happy. The players don't seem to be very happy. Liam Vosenia is facing not quite crisis, but certainly a test of his mettle.
Martin, yes or no? Tottenham, do they stay up?
No, they're rubbish.
Oh, my goodness. I thought you were going to cheer me up, Martin. I thought we were friends. Martin Lipton, Chief Sports Reporter at The Sun, who are #1 for football scoops. Thank you, Martin. Much more to come. Dolan's Dispatch about Islam. You won't want to miss it.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Two minutes past 9. Happy Friday, one and all. Talk breakfast. Mark Dolan with you till 10. Lovely to have your company. And breaking this morning, Nigel Farage steps into the Muslim public prayer row, saying such displays of dominance are unacceptable and should be banned. Is he right? Meanwhile, U-turn at number 19 as the Prime Minister is expected to scrap plans to toughen immigration rules around indefinite leave to remain. But will granting citizenship to the Boris wave cost the taxpayer tens of billions of pounds? And if so, did you vote for that? And is Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives, right that the public should intervene and stop shoplifters? Is that your job? Would you risk life and limb to save a jar of Nescafe Gold Blend from being nicked? Let me know your thoughts. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. The excellent Tommy is taking your calls. Nahar is directing our TV output. If you want to watch the show, just head over to YouTube, search Talk and up we pop. Sam's pressing the buttons and Christian is the boss today. We've got a very busy hour to come. As the saying goes, let's talk. In just a moment, I'm delighted to be welcoming onto the show politics legend, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Lord John Redwood. But first, today's Dolan's Dispatch. Sorry, am I missing something here? Over 1,000 men praying at a national monument in central London, declaring that Allah is the only God. And that's not problematic? Now, I salute the Conservative MP Nick Timothy for having the courage to speak out on this issue and to defend the traditions, culture and very fabric of our society. It is surely the reddest of red flags that this brave and talented politician, who simply said the true bit out loud and stood up for what makes this country great, based upon its Judeo-Christian values, now faces death threats and the need for security. And let's be honest, it's not going to be the Quakers, the Jews, or even the Scientologists going after Nick Timothy, is it? It will be radical Islamists who represent over 90% of the work of the anti-terror agency Prevent. We must all be very grateful to the brave and courageous Nick Timothy for his courage and for sparking this important national conversation. A conversation we simply won't be able to have when Sir Keir Starmer's illiberal Orwellian Islamophobia law comes into place. So at 9:05 in the morning on a Friday, if we're going to do the so-called Islamophobia, we better do it before we get arrested. So here goes. Is it Islamophobic to point out that the bombs, the gun attacks, the use of vehicles as a weapon, the need for barriers in pedestrianised parts of our cities, the need for armed cops at Christmas markets comes from extremists of the Islamic faith? Is that Islamophobic? Is it Islamophobic to point out that French cartoonists at the headquarters of a magazine in Paris were murdered for their satirical publication? Is it Islamophobic to point out that a school teacher in Batley in this country remains on the run for showing an image of the Prophet Muhammad to students as an educational tool in a media studies class? That poor man and his family are still on the run, still in fear of their lives. Is it Islamophobic to point out that Salman Rushdie was threatened with death for writing a book critical of Islam? What about Osama bin Laden, who flew planes into the World Trade Center in the name of this wicked ideology, a dark subset of the Muslim faith? Is it Islamophobic to criticize certain cultural practices, such as female genital mutilation, full-face hijabs, and the wider subjugation of women, including in relation to so-called family voting, in which dad decides who his wife will be choosing in the ballot box? Is it Islamophobic to to call out the crime, in my view, of first cousin marriage, which leads to devastating disabilities and presents a huge long-term cost to the NHS? Is it Islamophobic to call out the racially aggravated nature of the grooming gangs, with Pakistani Muslim men vastly overrepresented in the northwest of England in relation to these wicked crimes? And it was crimes against white British girls. Yes, their colour matters because it's why they were chosen. Is it Islamophobic to point out that this is a Christian country? Well, a recent poll asked Jewish people if Britain was a Christian country, and 80% of Jewish people said yes, Britain is a Christian country. The same question put to British Muslims, the answer was 37% in the affirmative. Now, this is unfortunate because it is Christian values which are Western values. It is Christian values which underpin our country, our society. The principles of free speech, tolerance, democracy, and the rule of law. Western values are Christian values and are the foundation of our civilizational success. Of course, this public prayer was a flex. Of course, it was messaging. We're here and we're not going anywhere. Of course, it was a challenge to everything that we hold dear. Just like those weekly so-called peace marches with radical Islamists allowed to wander around with placards saying globalise the intifada, which means bombs in shopping centres and on public transport. That was tolerated by our two-tier cops. The weekly so-called peace marches that made British Jewish people afraid to leave their homes or send their kids to school in religious clothing. Now, the majority of British Muslims make a wonderful contribution to this country. They are our friends. They are viewers and listeners to Talk Breakfast. They are our colleagues, our neighbours, even our lovers. But too many among them are dangerous zealots who bring danger, who bring terror, hostility and aggression. Moderate Muslims must speak out. And this kind of public display of religious intimidation that we saw in Trafalgar Square cannot be tolerated. And it's not Islamophobic to point that out. It is 9 minutes past 9. This is Talk Breakfast. Let's get reaction to this developing story from Lord John Redwood, former Conservative Cabinet Minister. Good morning, Lord Redwood.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. What do you make of the intervention of your stablemate, Nick Timothy, in regard to this display of religiosity in Trafalgar Square?
As you say, he made a brave statement and made an important contribution to a national debate many people do think we need to pursue, and you've made your own strong contribution this morning. I want to live in a tolerant country. I'm very proud of our tradition that we believe that people can practice their own religions freely according to our laws, and that Christians can pray in a church and people of the Muslim faith can pray in their mosque. And I think there are occasions when you may license religious groups to do things in public spaces, but that has to be done conscious of the impact it will have on others and conscious of the other uses we normally make of those public spaces. But I wouldn't rule out all prayer meetings or gatherings in public spaces, but it has to be done with the consent of the community at large by consulting the police and the council to make sure that all is reasonable. But what we don't believe in is allowing any particular group to perform in public in a way which upsets or disjoints others. And that is obviously what is at the heart of this. And I was very pleased that KB Badenoch, when Nick Timothy came under fire, immediately gave her shadow cabinet member full support. And she made a very good statement herself yesterday at the Conservative press conference to launch the local election results. And she tackled it head on. And in a moderate way, she set out what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And this is about drawing judgment lines over what is a sensible freedom of expression and freedom of religion, and what is an intrusion on others that goes against our traditions.
Put bluntly, Lord John Redwood, is Islam getting out of hand in this country?
Well, Islam has to live under the law, like all the other religions and like all people of no religion. And it usually does. And the vast majority of Muslims in our country, as you describe, are our fellow citizens, friends, colleagues, and they are a welcome part of our community. But there is a feeling in the country that there's been two-tier policing, and that the radical elements of Islam and the ones that are encouraging terror or may even be practicing terror themselves are not being strongly enough policed, and that is something which has to be addressed.
I've received a message from Ian in Wimbledon in South London, John, and Lord Redwood, and it reads as follows. Good morning, Mark. To my knowledge, public Muslim prayer is not allowed in the likes of Dubai. Why is it allowed in the UK? In the current climate, what responsible mayor would think this was a great idea? Did that display in Trafalgar Square feel performative to you, Lord Redwood? Did it seem like something of a cultural flex?
Well, I wasn't there, and that's why I've avoided making comment this morning on it, because I think you should have seen it for yourself or studied the film carefully, which I have not done. So I thought we might be talking about energy prices. And
we'll definitely come to that, absolutely.
But I think those who do study it then need to have a debate about whether it went beyond and why it wasn't policed properly.
Well, let me tell you, John Redwood, you're always very, very an important voice when it comes to matters of culture in the country, and I really appreciate you addressing this rather important conversation we're having this morning. But let's get on to the economy. Let's get on to energy prices, which is your other area of expertise. I've got happy memories, John Redwood, of your time on Talk Drive when I used to look after that show during the pandemic, when you were imploring the government to go for growth. So what is your appraisal of the state of the economy at the moment? How much trouble are we in?
Well, we're in a lot of trouble because practically everything Rachel Reeves and her colleagues have done has been anti-growth. They've done some things in the name of growth, like EU reset and higher taxes and higher public spending. That won't deliver the growth they think. It will often do the opposite. And they are now in a situation where, because they're spending too much and borrowing too much, their interest rates are too high. So more and more of our public spending is going on just paying for all the debts they're incurring and not helping pay for the things we really need, like a stronger defence, for example. And now on top of that, they've got this surge in world gas and oil prices, which has a knock-on to our prices, although there isn't an international single price of gas. And that is now going to both knock growth further and put prices up. So it's doubly a blow to them that they're going to have higher inflation and even less growth. And the Bank of England usually gets it wrong. And the danger is the Bank of England now will try and use higher interest rates for longer to deal with the inflation. And of course, that isn't actually going to change this position on the war in Iran, but it will slow the economy even more. And that, of course, then means we borrow even more because there's less money coming in taxes, more money going out on unemployment. The disaster for this government is youth unemployment and general unemployment. Every month it's been going up, and we were promised growth, and growth to most people means more jobs, not fewer jobs. And it means higher real pay because it's earned, because productivity is going up. And they've got the reverse. They've got a productivity collapse in the public services. They've got too many people out of work. They've got too big a benefit bill. And so then none of the finances add up.
John, I'm so confused. It's almost like socialism doesn't work.
Well, you know, that could be a conclusion. And if you look at the past history, of course, I mean, the 1970s socialist government, we had to go to the IMF. There was a big financial crisis, mass unemployment. The Blair-Brown government ended in tears with a massive banking crash and a big recession. And most Labour governments end up putting unemployment up, even though they're meant to be the party of working people. And that's why so many working people have concluded it's not their party. It seems to be becoming the benefits party. And it's alienating industry, it's alienating workers, it's alienating even their own trade unions.
John, what is your prognosis for the economy in the short to medium term? Because some people think there might be an early general election. I have my doubts because I don't think Turkeys vote for Christmas. So assuming that this parliament runs to its full term, where could we be in 2 to 3 years' time? Because we've got the breaking news this morning, John, that government borrowing jumped unexpectedly last month to the second highest February since records began. Public sector borrowing stood at £14.3 billion in February, £2.2 billion higher than a year ago. So where do you think we might be by the time of the next election?
Well, I mean, on current trends, we're going to have more inflation and a bigger cost of living squeeze than we would like, because the government keeps putting prices up and putting taxes up. We're going to be taxed to death. We're going to have higher unemployment, and we're going to have little or no growth. All of these things are reversible. The changes you have to make are not that difficult. Indeed, if the government cancelled practically every economic and tax announcement it had made since the general election, we would be in a much better position now. As a result, it's so unfortunate, but she began so badly with a huge tax on jobs and then couldn't understand why the number of jobs fell away. And then she went on to tax particular sectors, so she upset all the farmers, and we're not now growing enough of our own food. And she taxed the high street to death just at the time when young people would usually expect to be able to get their early first job in a pub or a leisure business or a shop. And so it was all just a disaster. And it was so predictable. Many of us were shouting from the sidelines saying, please don't do this. We want you to succeed. We want to live in a country that's prosperous and free. So here's some free advice. But they turned down the free advice.
John, a delight to see you again. Always the voice of common sense. My thanks to Lord John Redwood, former Conservative Cabinet Minister. Wouldn't he be the perfect Chancellor at this moment in time? It's important that I point out, Christian, that the government will argue that they've inherited an almighty economic mess from the last Conservative government, that what they've got is depleted public services, low growth and inflation thanks to the Tories, and they've got a mandate to rebuild and strengthen the country and the economy. Let's get a voice note on Muslim public prayer from Roger.
G'day, mate. It's Roger Roadside here saying, how yous all going? Listen, in regards to the big private, public prayer event thing that happened in Trafalgar Square, I mean, it's not the case that they're praying. I think that's the issue. They've been doing this event for the last couple of years, and each year it's gotten bigger and bigger. I think the thing that sticks in everyone's throat is the fact that it just feels for the last decade or so that British culture and British faith has just been pegged back. We can't say this, we can't do that, we can't go this way because we'll offend these people, and we can't say Merry Christmas anymore, and we can't have pork in sandwiches in canteens anymore, and we can't do this and we can't do that. And it feels like we've been bending over backwards for the last decade. And I guess this public showing of this faith that is foreign to the British culture. It is. It's not a part of our culture. It's not a faith that we follow.
Well, thank you for that. And I think you raise a lot of good points there, Roger. I can't disagree. What do you folks think about this? Is Muslim public prayer compatible with British culture? Is Islam, is it a takeover religion? What do you think about that? Well, next up, we'll be hearing the views of one of the country's very finest journalists, one of the regular guests on Question Time. Always worth hearing. Don't go anywhere. It's 9:20. This is Talk Breakfast.
conflict breaks out anywhere in the world, it has consequences here at home. Talk War is your definitive national security briefing. From the conflict in Ukraine to the tensions in Gaza and the latest escalation with Iran, this is where you'll find comprehensive comment and expert analysis with multiple updates throughout the day. The Talk War podcast from Talk, available on the Talk app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast 9:24. Is public Muslim prayer compatible with British culture? Let's get the views of the senior political commentator at The Telegraph, regular on the BBC Question Time show, Annabel Denham. Good morning, Annabel.
Good morning, Mark.
With this intervention from Nick Timothy, the Conservatives are starting to look quite conservative again, aren't they?
Well, you might say they're starting to look quite reformy as well, Mark. But no, that's right. And, you know, hats off to Kemi Badenoch for really standing by her shadow Justice Secretary on this issue, this row, which just seems to be rumbling on and on. And Nick Timothy has taken a heavy dose of flack for his Twitter post earlier this week. But, you know, I think we should ask what the motivation for that event was. We should acknowledge that there are far more suitable places for Islamic prayer. I think somebody was trying to make a political point, and Nick was entitled to make a political point back. You know, what happens in our public spaces is not neutral. We should acknowledge that Islam doesn't admit a plurality of religions, unlike other faiths. And the fact that Starmer has responded to this by calling for Kemi to sack Nick Timothy just illustrates the dangers of Labour's new definition of anti-Muslim hostility, which they've insisted won't restrict our right to criticise Islam. And yet here we've got the Prime Minister calling for the head of a senior figure of the shadow cabinet in response to his criticisms of Islam. Now, you know, just looking briefly at the politics of this, it's all about what's going to happen in May. It's all about what happened in the Gorton and Denton by-election. This is Keir Starmer, fully aware that there's going to be a bloodbath at the local elections, at the elections in Scotland and in Wales, and he is desperately trying to shore up the Muslim vote, pander to the Muslim vote. So unfortunately, this is just the beginning of this sort of inflamed rhetoric that we're going to get from the PM.
It's a difficult cultural and political moment for the country, isn't it, Annabel? Because you have millions of moderate Muslims in this country who start businesses, who are our friends, neighbours, colleagues, sometimes lovers as well. And yet there is this hateful ideology suffused within the faith that detests everything we stand for. How does one square that circle?
Well, it's very difficult. And, you know, I would say governments have been grappling with this for years, but actually I think
decades.
But then it's a nettle that they've really refused to grasp, isn't it? You know, integration is the big issue at the moment. It's all very well net migration coming down now, you know, far lower than it was at that record peak of 906,000. But how are we going to help assimilate, integrate people who have come here in very, very large numbers just in recent years? In terms of, you know, the Muslim faith, you know, we do have around 4 million people in this country who identify as Muslim. That makes up around 6.5% of the population. And as you say, Mark, the overwhelming majority of those people want to come here, they want to live here, they want to work, they want to contribute, and they want to be part of British society and subscribe to our values and our identity. But there is also the problem of Islamist extremism that I think successive governments have been all too willing to turn a blind eye to, and there's a very real danger now that we're living out Karl Popper's warning about the paradox of tolerance, which is that if a country is excessively tolerant, then in the end it becomes intolerant because it has to tolerate those who have intolerant views themselves. And I think that we are really reaching that point.
Well, indeed. And if you've got interesting statistics, Annabelle, for example, British Jewish people were asked whether the UK was a Christian country. 80% answered in the affirmative. 37% of British Muslims acknowledged that the UK is a Christian country. So there's definitely an issue there.
Well, this is the point that Nick Timothy was trying to make initially about domination and the fact that in the scale of Islam in Britain and the fact that this is a faith that wants to spread as much as possible and that it doesn't have that tolerance for plurality of religions. And obviously he's faced a problem for making that point. We are, for now, a Christian country. We have the Church of England, and I think that even if you live in Britain, you're not a Christian, a practicing Christian, don't consider yourself to be a Christian, you would accept that Christianity underpins so much of our identity, so many of our sort of beliefs and our traditions and our values, and that it has an important role to play, even if you're not a part of a congregation every Sunday morning.
It would be nice, wouldn't it, if we could talk about politics. So let's do just that, Annabelle. And Sharon Graham, the boss of Unite, one of the biggest unions in the country, has warned that Labour will be decimated in May at the local elections and that Sir Keir Starmer will be booted out of office in the aftermath. There are even suggestions that her union could sever all ties with the party. I mean, do you think there's any way back for Sir Keir Starmer at this stage?
Well, Sharon Graham has been threatening to disaffiliate from Labour for some time now. So in a way, this isn't anything new, and it's not surprising in a sense. There's a very strong sense of disillusionment with the Starmer administration among unions, union leaders, those on the left of the Labour Party who would consider Angela Rayner, who's been on manoeuvres this week, to be a much more appealing candidate to lead the Labour Party and indeed run the country. But it just speaks to the wider sort of threat that Keir Starmer is under. When I speak to Labour MPs, none of them seem to believe he can survive much beyond May. He's just so deeply unpopular. You look at his net approval rating, it plummeted to lows not seen by any Prime Minister in recent history. He doesn't really seem to have any vision for the country. When they went away at Christmas, backbench MPs were screaming, clamouring for Keir Starmer to really have a fundamental rethink. They were saying he's got 5 whole months here. Labour have got an overwhelming majority, and he can return in January, and he can start to push through some measures that will be popular with left-leaning voters in Britain. And unfortunately, he came back. He talked about the cost of living, and the economy is just in a worse state. With every passing moment, we just had the figures today about borrowing. We had the interest rates decision yesterday, and I think they've just reached sort of depths of despair in the Parliamentary Labour Party. So even though it isn't that straightforward for them to defenestrate Keir Starmer, I think it's increasingly plausible, and they'll just wait until after May to strike so that he is the one associated with that disaster, and they can bring somebody else in. But the question has long been, who do they replace him with? As I say, Angela Rayner has launched this broadside this week against Keir Starmer, against his lack of vision and about wanting to go further and faster with a left-wing agenda. But she's still got to resolve her tax affairs. Ed Miliband is potentially a contender. He's very popular among Labour members, but they're saying that he doesn't really want the top job. Obviously, he was leading the Labour Party in 2015. That was a general election. Most people thought Labour should have won, but obviously they lost to David Cameron and the Conservatives. So, Andy Burnham doesn't have an obvious path back to Parliament, let alone to number 10. So there is a shortage of alternates here, which strengthens Keir Starmer's position.
Annabelle, fantastic to see you again. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Annabelle Denham, the senior political commentator at The Telegraph newspaper. So, a lot of questions about this. One question I got for you at 9:33. Is there a free speech argument for public Muslim prayer? That's next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
9:35 Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan with you tomorrow and Sunday. Very excited on Sunday morning. It is a Talk Breakfast exclusive. Tom Bower, the author of a devastating new book about Harry and Meghan, live on the show 9:30 a.m. on Sunday. Is there a free speech argument for public Muslim prayer? Delighted to welcome the spokeswoman for the Free Speech Union, their External Affairs Officer, Connie Shaw. Good morning, Connie.
Morning, Mark.
What do you make of the free speech argument for what we saw in Trafalgar Square?
Well, you could argue that that's part of Muslims' free speech, but the point that Nick Timothy is making is that there is the political wing of Islam that is firmly opposed to freedom of speech. And really the free speech argument that is going on right now is whether Nick Timothy had the right to express that concern in the way that he did. And it's extraordinary to see Labour MPs and Labour officially calling for Kemi Badenoch to sack him from the front benches when he is raising extremely important concerns about the way that political Islam is trying to dominate our society. And we know that all too well. And unfortunately, Labour MPs can't appreciate how knowledgeable and well-read Nick Timothy is on this issue. And every time that people try to criticise him for what he said, all they have to say is that he's Islamophobic and bigoted. And of course, Steve Reid made it very clear in Parliament when the Islamophobia definition was announced that people criticising Muslim practices would not be branded as Islamophobic, or as they've now rebadged it, hostile towards Muslims. But that's exactly what's happened. So in less than a week, the definition that this Labour government has come up with to essentially stop people from saying what they want to say about Islam or Muslim practices, from stopping them from being able to say it. And they were very clear. They've always been adamant that free speech campaigners have nothing to be concerned about. yet, but within less than a week, they've shown their true colours. And in many ways, it's very helpful that Nick Timothy has said this, not least because it's an important thing to talk about, but it's really tested what Labour actually wanted to do with this definition. And it's now clear as day what they intended, and it's given, it's empowered MPs who want to silence Nick Timothy to do so now that they have this definition.
So is it conceivable, Connie, that if we had this new law in place in regards to anti-Muslim hostility, that Mr. Timothy could have his collar felt?
Well, absolutely. I mean, he is. That is what's happening. I mean, you call
he's
it
being condemned at the moment, right? But you're saying that the police could be involved if, under the circumstances of this law going through.
Well, you're calling it a law, but actually the whole point, and Labour have made sure to stress, is there's a non-statutory definition. They've made it very clear that it's not the law, but that means, so it's not the law, but people will be prohibited from saying certain things nonetheless. It's like the new non-crime hate incident.
Right.
So, and Baroness Cahir, who's on the working group, who came up with this definition when it was released, she said that this would provide legal advice to institutions and essential clarity to institutions on how they operate. So it may not be law, but it would almost be better if it was the law, because then it could have been scrutinised by Parliament. Instead, the government handpicked 5 individuals who all have connections to Islamist groups to come up with a definition to shame people and punish people for saying what they really think about Islam and Muslim practices, and we're seeing it being played out.
I appreciate that that detail, that correction, that it's not legally binding, but that it will have huge implications for people's lives, for their careers, potentially for their safety as well. We know that Nick Timothy has faced death threats since his intervention. Connie, given the terror links to the Islamic faith in this country, given the fact that in many Muslim communities, women are second-class citizens, claims of family voting in which dad decides who's going to get the vote in the ballot box, first cousin marriage, you name it. Is there a case for Islamophobia?
Do you mean in the sense that there's a case for people being Islamophobic, or the definition?
Well, no, to fear Islam as a religion and as a cultural
absolutely.
faith.
I mean, the word Islamophobia is an oxymoron. That Islamophobia suggests that it's irrational to fear Islam, when personally I would say it's very rational to fear Islam. And people keep saying, oh, Nick Timothy and the Tory party only have a problem with Muslims and Islam, but we have to. It is okay and absolutely legitimate to point out that Islam is very different to every other religion that is a big religion in this country. I mean, Islam is the second biggest religion in this country, and it's the only religion that has a political wing that wishes to dominate. Nick Timothy was absolutely right. We know that this is the case. I mean, even in Labour's new social cohesion strategy, they're very clear to say that Islamism is the biggest threat to us domestically, and we've known that for a very long time. There is, Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism and Sikhism. You do not hear faith leaders of those religions talking about wanting to not just take part but take over. You don't see police going to mosques to consult them on how they should police, like we saw after those boys in Wakefield accidentally scuffed a Quran, where they dragged the boy's mother to go and speak to an imam which said he would happily die for the book. He said that on camera in front of police officers and the boy's mother. That's what's annoying about this, is that Labour in particular, and people across the political spectrum, perhaps even the Conservative Party until recent years, have not been happy to say that Islam is very different to other religions. And if you listen to people like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who know far better than anyone else what it's like to live under political Islam and the stages of dawah, and that's what Nick Timothy means when he says that mass public ritual and praying and worshipping is straight out of the Islamist playbook. That was what was done under when the Islam colonizing parts of the Middle East and Europe in previous centuries. That was part of the plan to make sure that Islam had a dominant place in public life. And as you were saying earlier, in places like the UAE, this is banned. And the UAE has been giving lectures to the West for a very long time that we're making mistakes, that we should be banning the Muslim Brotherhood, of course. So it's just I think that Labour MPs know what's going on, but they would prefer to ignore it. And then who can blame the public for assuming that they're doing this because they want to pander to the Muslim vote, which they're terrified, that is going to be lost to the Greens, and it's already been lost. So it's very interesting to see Labour's strategy when it comes to this issue, because whether they like it or not, whether they know it or not, Nick Timothy is a hero and one of the best MPs we've had for generations to be calling this out after years of successive governments not being able to tackle this issue. It's extremely important and will be looked back on in the timeline of how we dealt, if we ever deal with Islamism. Him making this statement will be such a huge turning point.
And Connie, what would you say to those who argue that the vast majority of British Muslims are peace-loving, they make a huge contribution to our society, and that actually to pray in public is something that's enjoyed by people of all faiths, including at Trafalgar Square, and that this is free speech for Muslims to pray in public?
Well, it is true that the vast majority of British Muslims aren't necessarily interested, of course, in committing acts of terror or politically dominating. But the issue is that we have a minority of Islamists who do want that, and they dominate the discourse. So the people who are one of the most affected groups and the most forgotten about when it comes to the government introducing this anti-Muslim hostility definition are normal Muslims, westernized Muslims themselves. They are the ones at most risk from talking out against the radical parts of their own communities. And also when it comes to this is again where we need to recognise the difference between Islam and other religions in this country and Nick Timothy points this out, the Adnan, the call to prayer, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. That statement is a declaration of dominance because it's telling you that the only true believers are Muslims. It's a evangelical religion that it is committed to try and convert as many people as possible. Until we are able to say that there is a difference between Islam and therefore the theological statements that are being made at mass prayers to other religions, then we're not going to be able to tackle this issue. For people to compare it to other expressions of religious praying and worship is very it's just not
disingenuous.
It's disingenuous to claim that it's similar, and until people get their heads around that. And there's this Einat Wilf, she's a Israeli ex-politician. She's coined this term called West-splaining, where people in the West do not understand what Islam actually is and therefore what Islamism is. We try to explain away things that Islamists are saying very clearly. They state in clear terms what they want to do, yet we are more comfortable pretending that they don't really mean it or that they can't really mean it because what you can't possibly understand wanting to do that. But give them respect that they deserve and take them at their word. And that is not to say, like Nick Timothy said, that every Muslim at this public praying was an Islamist. But it is the case that mass demonstrations of worship is part of the Islamist playbook. And the fact that Sadiq Khan was there gives it political legitimisation within British politics.
And briefly, Connie,
and Nick Timothy should be allowed to call that out.
He should. Briefly, Connie, I suppose as a broadcaster and the external affairs officer of the Free Speech Union, and as a woman, you don't take kindly to the treatment of some females within Muslim communities.
No, absolutely not. And they are also a particularly vulnerable group if we stop people from calling this out, because we know for a fact that things like FGM, forced marriage, honour-based violence are more prevalent within those communities. And because of the way that this definition has been rolled out, which, by the way, the FSU has launched a judicial review against the government, telling them to withdraw the definition immediately until our case is heard, we know that this definition is going to stop people from being able to talk about practices. We've just seen it.
This definition will make it harder to protect women in this country.
Yes, absolutely it will.
Surely the progressive left are very concerned about the safety of women in our communities. I'm so confused.
Well, it seems that parts of the progressive left...
I thought that was woke to care about women.
Yes,
I don't understand, Connie. You've got to help me.
Because they're more committed to the doctrine of multiculturalism than facing up to the truth, that actually calling out harm against women, no matter who commits it, is important. They find it very difficult to talk about these things because it shatters their own worldview that not all cultures are equal.
Connie, a privilege to have you on the show. A really important conversation. Thank you for your time and your articulacy. Connie Shaw, who is the External Affairs Officer at the Free Speech Union. Much more to come. This is Talk Breakfast 9:47.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. It is 9:50 and a developing story. The police investigation into Andrew Mountbatten Windsor may widen to assess potential corruption offences as well as allegations of child trafficking for sex. Thames Valley Police is reportedly set to look into a variety of corruption offences and conduct a scoping assessment in regard to sex trafficking allegations. Let's get reaction from Michael Cole, who is a leading royal commentator. Good morning, Michael. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Mark. It's the nice day up here in East Anglia. The mist is lifting and it looks as if Andrew Mountbatten Windsor might be moving into his new home, Marsh Farm, on the Sandringham estate. Removal vans have been seen there. A couple of stout timber doors have been put up to screen the house to a certain extent from the public. But the man himself hasn't been seen around here lately. Not since, in fact, that photograph of him in the back of a car attempting to avoid the cameras on his way back from Aylsham police station when he was arrested on his 66th birthday. The police operation, as you say, continues. Apparently, the police, Thames Valley Police, are looking into a number of statutes dating back even to 1906 to see if there is a possibility or a case to answer with regard to corruption. That investigation, we understand, and there you are, you see the photograph, famous one now around the world, after he'd had his harrowing day under cross-examination in a police interview room. That will take a year, apparently, according to the police. And in the meantime, of course, the man himself has to continue with his life. One wonders what it's going to be like. Of course, Marsh Farm Cottage is certainly a lot less grand. In fact, it's quite a modest place. It was formerly occupied by a tenant farmer. And it's a lot less grand than Anne Hall, for instance, where his nephew, Prince William, Prince of Wales, and the Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children live, also on the Sandringham estate. So that's the life he's got ahead. I'm quite sure that around here there are some rather nice golf courses. Perhaps he'll spend some time there. And also, I'm sure that some friends among the turnip toffs, the people up here in North Norfolk who like country pursuits and have large houses, might take him up. But a very worrying time for him, of course, to know that there is going to be this police investigation, which will go on for some time. There we are, Marsh Farm at Wolverton. Quite a nice house for you and me, but quite a come down for the likes of the former Prince Andrew. 5 bedrooms, as I say, unlike I think it was 13 at the Royal Lodge in the middle of Windsor Great Park, that beautiful white wedding cake of a house where he lived for many, many years, and indeed had a long lease, which of course he then had to surrender to come here and live on his brother's property, because Sandringham Estate and the Balmoral Estate are personally owned by the monarch, personally owned by the king. And therefore, there's no question that this is a royal palace, which is part of the Crown estate owned by the rest of us, owned by the government, administered by the government for the people of the country. So there we are, a difficult prospect ahead of him. And I'm quite sure he's going to have some sleepless nights for many years to come. But,
yet it's not inconceivable, Michael, the man who was once Queen Elizabeth's favourite son could go to prison if these allegations are successfully prosecuted.
Yeah, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner has been over in America this week asking for full access to the unredacted Epstein files. And if he gets that, I'm sure that they will go through that. The police, of course, are now at the moment looking through all of Andrew's telephones and computers, and that will take a long time.
This could take years, Michael, but if ultimately Andrew were to lose his freedom and be accommodated, ironically, at His Majesty's pleasure, what might the implications be for the monarchy, do you think?
Well, they're very, very serious. I don't think you can exaggerate how serious this is.
Yes.
It is a full-blown crisis, without any doubt at all. And it's highly regrettable. And there you see him with Epstein, or Epstein, as they call him in America, Epstein, and Peter Mandelson, apparently on Cape Cod, or Martha's Vineyard, was it? Or Martha's Vineyard, one of the homes that Epstein owns.
Yeah.
All together, they're in their fluffy white dressing gowns.
I know.
It's a very, very bad look. It's very, very unfortunate for the royal family. And it's something they've got to confront. The king has moved promptly, swiftly, decisively to do what he can to distance the monarchy from Prince Andrew. I mean, I wouldn't have thought it was actually possible to remove the title prince, but they found a way to do it. And the only other thing which remains is perhaps to remove him from the line of succession. He's 8th in line at the moment after the Prince of Wales and his 3 children, and then Prince Harry and his 2 children. He's number 8. That, of course, would require the agreement of not just this country, but the 14 other realms where the king is the monarch, where he's the head of state. They would all have to come together and agree on that happening. It can be done, I understand, and perhaps it will be. Then, of course, it's up to the law to take its course. And I'm sure that that will not be, as you say, a brief period.
No, indeed. And in some ways, the process will be the punishment, and it will go beyond, Andrew, won't it? It will affect the king, it will affect the monarchy, it will affect the royal family. Michael, you've been an elite-level royal commentator for decades. Are you surprised that this has happened to Andrew, given the fact that no doubt you've had contact with the former Duke of York yourself over the years as a royal correspondent?
Yeah, I am surprised. I'm sorry in some ways. But I first did a film about him when he was 18 years old, and he'd just come from Gordonston School, and he turned up unexpectedly at the Calgary Stampede and rode in it with his brother, Prince Charles, as he then was. And when he was engaged to Sarah Ferguson in 1986, I did the interview along with Anthony Carthew of ITN at Buckingham Palace, and it was said widely that it was the most revealing, most candid royal interview ever done. And of course, they were wildly popular. I mean, they didn't have to be encouraged to kiss on the balcony at Buckingham Palace after the wedding. They were mad about each other, and they were regarded very around the world as a breath of fresh air. And of course, at that time, he'd served with some distinction and courage in the South Atlantic as a helicopter pilot. He came back, if you remember, with a red rose clamped between his ample teeth, and they were very, very popular.
Michael, how the mighty